The kettle sang its lonely tune above the hearth while I bent over the fire, coaxing the flame to breathe. Smoke curled through the narrow chimney like a ribbon of ghost-gray silk. I had grown used to its sting in my eyes. It was the scent of home, of cinder, soup, and survival. Our cottage stood at the far edge of the village, where the moorland began and the fields turned wild. The wood under my fingers was rough and cold. Father had chopped it earlier, though I told him he shouldn't. His cough had worsened these past weeks, but he'd only laugh and say, "You can't tell an old wolf to rest, little bird." He wasn't a wolf, not truly, just a man who had lived too long under an alpha's sky. I stirred the pot of stew again, though it hardly needed it. Habit kept my hands busy. The smell of boiled carrots and wild thyme filled the single-room house. Outside, the evening bled into lavender, the light thinning to gold between the thatched roofs. Father sat at the table mending his hat, the same old brown hat I wore whenever I went to the market. It had belonged to him once, before he'd pressed it into my hands on my 16th birthday and said, "If the world ever grows too loud, keep your head covered and your chin high." I never went anywhere without it. He looked up now, thread between his teeth. "You're too quiet, Anna." "I'm thinking," I said. "Of what?" "The farm I'll never have." He chuckled, low and fond. "You dream too heavy for such a small house." "Dreaming doesn't cost coin," I reminded him, and he smiled, though the corners of his eyes creased with something deeper than mirth. We had little and wanted less. That was our way. I washed the linens by the river, fetched water from the well, gathered fallen branches from the forest, and cooked whatever root or grain we could afford. It wasn't happiness, not in the way stories describe it, but it was ours. When the stew was ready, I ladled it into 2 bowls and set them on the table. "Eat before it cools," I said. He bowed his head in mock reverence. "To the finest cook in Woodstone lands." "Don't flatter me, old man." The spoon trembled slightly in his fingers, and I looked away, pretending not to see. Love sometimes means pretending. We ate in silence for a while. The crackle of firewood filled the pauses between our breaths. I wondered, as I often did, what lay beyond the forest ridges that guarded our village like dark shoulders. I'd never been farther than the marketplace in the valley. Beyond that, the land belonged to Alpha James Woodstone, the Mafia lord who ruled our province with coin and claw. People spoke of him in hushed tones as if his wolves could hear their hearts. Some said he was cruel, others said fair, most simply said nothing. I had seen his crest once, 2 silver daggers crossing over a black crown, stamped on the wagons that brought water every week. That was all I knew of him. Average Alpha, the villagers called him, neither devil nor saint. That suited me fine. When the bowls were empty, I rose to wash them, pouring a trickle of well water into the basin. My reflection shimmered in the pale metal, a woman of 31 with wind-tangled braids, smudged cheeks, and eyes the color of winter soil. Not beautiful, but alive. That was enough. Father leaned back in his chair, humming some old tune from before Mother died. The notes wrapped around me like the smell of rain. For a moment, everything felt still, almost peaceful. Then the horses came. At first it was only a distant tremor, a rhythm beneath the wind. I frowned, setting the bowl down. The sound grew louder, hooves striking stone, the jangle of bridles, men's voices calling through the dusk. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Father had already risen, face gone pale. "Stay inside, Anna." "Who is it?" He didn't answer. He went to the window instead, pushing the curtain aside. The torchlight outside shimmered against his weather-lined face. "Riders," he said. "Too many for traders, too ordered for bandits." My pulse quickened. I wiped my wet hands on my apron and joined him. Through the slit in the curtain, I saw them, shapes of men and horses moving between the cottages, their armor catching the firelight. At their head rode a man draped in a dark coat embroidered with silver thread. His stallion was black as pitch, hooves striking sparks against the cobblestones. A wolf's head gleamed on the rider's belt buckle, and the aura around him pressed on the air itself. Even from afar, I knew. James Woodstone. He didn't shout or brandish his sword. He didn't need to. His mere presence drew silence from every mouth in the square. The torches bowed when he passed, their flames bending in the wind of his command. "Find him," he said, his voice low but carrying. "Find Rayon." The name hit me like a thrown stone. Father's hand tightened around the curtain. I looked up at him. He looked back at me, and in that one breath we both understood. "They're looking for you," I whispered. He turned away from the window. "Anna, listen to me. Go to the cellar, hide there until I call." "No," I said, heart hammering. "You'll be taken." "I'll talk to them. Maybe it's a mistake." But I could hear the shouts outside, guards pounding on doors, neighbors crying out that they knew no such man. The torches drew closer, painting our cottage walls in wild orange. "Father." "Go." I didn't. I grabbed his arm instead. "If we hide together, we can leave by the back, the forest path." For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Then, with a sigh heavy as winter, he nodded. "All right," quietly. We slipped through the rear door, boots crunching on the frost-bitten earth. Behind us, the horses clattered nearer. I could hear one soldier barking orders. "Check every house! The Alpha wants the man alive." Alive, the word twisted my stomach. We moved along the narrow lane behind the cottages. Shadows swam against the snow. The forest loomed ahead, black and endless. My breath came in clouds, my hands shook, clutching the edge of Father's coat. "Why are they looking for you?" I whispered as we ran. "I don't know," he rasped. "I've done nothing to cross him." "But he's the Alpha. He must have reason." "Reason or rumor, it matters little now." Another shout echoed. A lantern swung in the distance. We ducked behind a woodpile as two soldiers passed by. Their swords glimmered, their eyes looked hungry, not for blood, but for reward. When they vanished, Father took my hand again. "Come before they circle back." We crossed the frozen field beyond the village. My skirts caught on brambles, the wind tugged my hat, and I clutched it tight. The torches behind us scattered like dying stars, one by one swallowed by distance. Still, I couldn't stop glancing back. From this far, the village looked like a cluster of candles trembling in the dark. And there, at its center, I saw him again. James Woodstone had dismounted. He stood beside his horse, cloak thrown back, his silhouette framed by fire. Even in shadow, I could see the sharpness of him, tall, broad-shouldered, golden hair bound at the nape, eyes cold enough to still a storm. He lifted his head slightly, as if he could sense the direction of our flight. For one impossible moment, his gaze found mine across the distance. It felt like the world stopped breathing. Then Father pulled me onward, and the forest swallowed us whole. We ran until the trees thickened and the snow muted every sound. Only then did we stop, chests heaving, hands clasped tight. The moon slipped between the branches above us, silver and silent. "Are we safe?" I whispered. "For tonight," Father said, voice shaking. I pressed my forehead against his shoulder, feeling the thud of his heart beneath the worn fabric. My own pulse echoed it, wild and frightened. Behind us, faint as memory, came the distant cry of a wolf. The forest was colder than it had ever been. Frost whispered under my boots as Father and I moved through the trees, our breaths white and uneven in the moonlight. The wind carried the faintest echo of hooves, distant but steady, like a heartbeat closing in. "Keep moving," Father murmured. "Don't look back." But I did. Always I did. Because behind us lay everything we had ever known. Our cottage, our neighbors, the smell of smoke and stew that still clung to my sleeves. The stars trembled through the branches, pale and unkind. Then came the sound again, closer this time, the rhythm of pursuit. "Father," my voice quivered, "they're coming." He turned, scanning the darkness between the pines. The glow of torches broke through the trees, gold spilling like molten fire across the snow. "Run, Anna," he said quietly. I grabbed his arm. "No, we run together." The horses appeared first, massive creatures, breath steaming in the cold. Behind them came the men, cloaked in black and silver, the mark of the Alpha's house etched on their armor. The forest seemed to shrink around their presence. And then he came. James Woodstone rode through the moonlight as though it bent for him. His stallion was white this time, its mane braided with threads of silver. His cloak swept behind him, dark as midnight silk. A thin crown of engraved metal circled his head, nothing ostentatious, but enough to remind every soul who ruled this land. Even from where I stood, the weight of him pressed against my chest. Power didn't shout, it breathed, slow and heavy, and made the world hold still. Father straightened beside me, shoulders squared though his hands trembled. "Rayon," James called, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You should have stayed in your home." Father took a step forward, palms raised. "My lord, I don't know what offense." "You killed my father." The words landed softly, but the silence that followed tore the air apart. "I did no such thing," Father said. His voice broke on the last word. "We argued, yes, but that was nothing more than words between men." James dismounted in one fluid motion. His boots sank into the snow without a sound. The moon caught on the silver threads of his coat, the embroidery glinting like a storm of stars. He moved closer until the distance between them was a single breath. "Words," he repeated low. "You think words cannot kill." I wanted to run to them, to stand between them, but my legs would not obey. James's gloved hand rested briefly on the hilt of his sword. He did not draw it with rage. He drew it with purpose, the kind that feels inevitable, ordained. The blade gleamed pale in the moonlight, a line between justice and cruelty. "Please," I whispered, "he's telling the truth." James's gaze flicked toward me for an instant, cold and unreadable, before returning to my father. The sound that followed was not the scream of metal or the cry of a man. It was something quieter, deeper, as if the forest itself sighed and went still. I didn't see blood. I didn't need to. I only saw Father's eyes widen in disbelief, his hand reaching for mine but finding only air. Then the world tilted. The torches wavered, the snow beneath him turned dark, and I fell to my knees as my hat rolled through the frost, landing beside me. "Father," my voice tore through the quiet, but it sounded far away, like someone else's grief echoing through a cave. James stood motionless, the blade at his side. His face betrayed nothing. Only the faintest tremor ran through his jaw before he turned away. "Bury him," he said to his men. "The guilty deserve at least a grave." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt hollow, carved clean out of me. I pressed my palms into the snow, trying to wake from the nightmare, but it was no dream. Every sound, the shifting horses, the crackle of torches, felt sharpened, unbearable. Then someone shouted from the village, "The house, it's burning." My head snapped up. Through the trees, I saw it, our cottage, our little world, swallowed by fire. The smoke rose like a dark prayer against the stars. Something inside me broke. I stumbled to my feet and ran. I didn't know where, only away from the fire, from the faces, from the truth that I was alone. But I hadn't gone far before hands seized my arms. A woman's voice hissed near my ear, "Don't struggle." She was tall, armor fitted close, her hair braided tight against her scalp. The torchlight caught on the insignia stitched to her shoulder, Iris, the Alpha's commander. Her eyes were pale as glass and held no softness. "Let me go," I shouted, thrashing, but she was far stronger. My hat fell to the ground and she kicked it aside. "You're the daughter?" she asked, more a statement than a question. I nodded through tears, breathless. "Then you come with us." "Why?" "Because the Alpha wishes it." I tried to pull free. "He killed my father." "Your father killed his," she said flatly. "Balance is balance." She bound my wrists with leather and dragged me toward the waiting carriage. The forest blurred around me. I remember stumbling once, twice, the world spinning like a wheel out of control. James stood near the horses, his gaze distant, the firelight painting his face in amber and shadow. "Please," I whispered as they passed him. "I need to tell you, he was kind, he never." "Enough." His voice was calm, final. "You'll speak when I permit it." That quiet command hurt more than any blow. It erased me. The soldiers lifted me into the iron carriage, its bars cold against my skin. When the door clanged shut, The sound echoed through the forest like the sealing of fate. I pressed my forehead to the bars, the metal burning cold. Outside, Iris mounted her horse beside James. "What do you want done with her?" she asked. "Take her to the manor," he said without turning. "I'll decide when we arrive." The carriage lurched forward. The forest receded, the torches fatting behind us until only darkness remained. I could still smell smoke, our home, our life, burning somewhere behind the horizon. My fingers itched for my hat, lying lost in the snow beside my father's stillness. I thought of his last words to me, "Keep your chin high." But my chin trembled, and my eyes blurred until even the moon looked broken. Somewhere in the black distance, a wolf howled. I didn't know if it mourned or hunted, perhaps both. I closed my eyes and whispered to the night. "Father, if you can hear me, tell me the truth. Tell me you didn't do it." The wind gave no answer, only the wheels rolling, the cage creaking, and the faint, steady rhythm of the Alpha's horse leading me deeper into the dark. The road wound through the mountains, like a ribbon of ice. Dawn had not yet broken, and the moonlight stretched long over the snow, pale and merciless. The carriage jolted with every stone, every frozen rut. I clutched the bars at my side just to stay upright. My wrists ached from the leather binds. Outside, the world was silver and soundless, save for the steady rhythm of hooves and the hiss of the wind through the pines. I could see the Alpha's shadow through the small grated window in front of me, James Woodstone, riding at the head of his men. He rode as if born to command the cold. His dark cloak moved like a living thing, snapping against the wind. The faint light caught on his hair, turning it to burnished gold. Even at a distance, his posture was too composed, too measured. Every movement of his horse, every turn of his head carried the same quiet authority that had silenced the village. I hated him for it. I hated that he could look so calm after setting my world on fire. Iris rode close behind, her silver armor glinting when the torches passed. Every so often she glanced at the cage, her gaze sharp as a blade, making sure I stayed small within it. Once I whispered to her through the bars, "How long until we reach his walls?" "By sunrise," she answered without turning. "Will you kill me there?" "No," she said simply. "He forbade it." The wind stole the rest of my breath. Forbade it. As if my life were a command, given or withheld on a whim. When the first faint light of morning spilled over the hills, the manor appeared, stone towers rising from the mist like ancient sentinels. The walls were carved with the crest of the Woodstone bloodline, 2 wolves circling a crown. It was beautiful and terrible, the kind of beauty that made your heart forget to beat. The carriage rattled across the drawbridge. I caught a glimpse of dark windows, frosted gardens, guards at every archway. No laughter, no voices, just the echo of hooves against cold stone. When we stopped, Iris opened the iron door and pulled me out. My legs trembled from the long night. "Keep your eyes down," she ordered. But I didn't. I lifted my gaze and met his. James stood at the base of the marble steps, gloved hands clasped behind his back. The dawn light touched the edge of his profile, sharp as a blade. His eyes were neither gold nor brown, but a strange shade between, like honey over steel. He looked at me without anger, without pity, just stillness. "Take her to the east cell," he said to Iris. "Feed her, no visitors." "Yes, Alpha." He turned and walked inside, cloak whispering against the stone, and I felt the air leave my lungs. I didn't know if I wanted to scream or collapse. Iris dragged me down a corridor that smelled of cold iron and damp moss. The walls were old, carved with sigils I couldn't read. We passed doors bolted shut, a few with faint candlelight behind them. Then she stopped at a small chamber, the one meant for me. It was barely larger than a closet. Iron bars ran across one wall. A straw-filled mattress sat in the corner. A single slit of a window let in a thread of gray light. "Welcome to your new home," Iris said. She shoved me inside and locked the gate. I stumbled, catching myself on the stone wall. The chills seeped into my palms. Hours might have passed, or minutes. Time had no meaning anymore. My body ached, but grief dulled everything. I thought of Father, his smile, his voice, the way he used to call me little bird when I carried firewood home. I pressed my forehead against the bars and whispered his name, but the walls swallowed it whole. The door opened again some time later. Iris entered, carrying a small wooden tray. She set it on the floor beside the gate, bread no bigger than her palm, a cup of thin broth already cooling. "Eat," she said. I stared at it. "This is not enough." "It will keep you alive." I met her eyes, heat rising in my throat. "Alive for what? To remind me what you did." Her jaw tightened. "Watch your tongue." "You killed him." My voice shook, but the words came faster. "You burned everything I had. You call this mercy." Iris straightened. "Your father destroyed the Alpha's father. It is proven." "Proven?" I laughed bitterly. "By whose mouth? You all whisper what he commands you to believe." "Mind your words," she warned. "Killers," I said. "Every one of you." Her eyes flashed. "Killers? No, we follow justice." I took a step closer to the bars. "Then justice is blind, because my father was innocent." She tilted her head, voice colder now. "You are lucky James is too noble to kill a woman who spits at his law. He should have ended you where you stood." "You should have destroyed me," I said quietly, "because now it is too late." A small smile curved her lips. "Too late." I met her gaze, steady. "You caged me, Iris, but you didn't break me." Her laugh was sharp, echoing off the walls. "You are a foolish little fox." She turned to leave, but something inside me snapped. I lunged forward, reaching through the bars. My hands caught the edge of her armor before she moved faster, grabbing my wrists and twisting them aside. She threw me backward against the wall. The impact stole the breath from my chest. Her face lowered to mine, voice hard as iron. "James is merciful but not forgiving. Do not give him reason to change his mind." I spat at her feet. The tiny defiance felt like fire in my throat. Her eyes darkened. "You are alive because he wills it, remember that." "Alive," I rasped. "He burned my house. He ended my father. What life is left to take?" "To kill the killer of his father," she said simply. "My father was innocent," I whispered. She looked away just for a moment. Then she turned toward the door. "Eat what you can, rest, you'll need your strength." "For what?" Her hand lingered on the door latch. "Kindness has a price, and James always collects." The door closed behind her. I sank to the floor, my hands trembling. The cold crept through the stone into my bones. I hadn't cried since the forest, not properly, but the tears came now, silent and burning. Outside the window, snow began to fall again, slow flakes drifting through the slit of light, settling over the bars like white ash. I touched the cold metal and whispered to the night, "If kindness is what keeps me alive, then may it break him before it breaks me." The wind sighed through the corridor, carrying no answer, only the faint echo of footsteps fading into silence. The air turned colder that night, heavy with silence. Even the wind that had whispered through the broken stones seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something. I had barely closed my eyes when the sound came, boots striking stone in a rhythm too measured to belong to a guard. He was coming. The torch outside my cell guttered and flared as a tall shadow filled the doorway. Alpha James Woodstone stepped inside with the calmness of a man who never needed to announce his power. The flame bent toward him, drawn by his presence as if even fire recognized its master. He carried no sword now, but his authority was weapon enough. Behind him, the corridor glowed dimly, a corridor that led to the world beyond, a world I could no longer touch. He said nothing at first, just studied me, eyes the pale gray of frozen river water. I wanted to speak, to curse him, to ask why, but my voice betrayed me, trembling with fear and fury both. He lifted a strip of linen from his belt. Before I could draw breath, he stepped close and tied it around my mouth, firm but not cruel. The cloth smelled faintly of iron and pine smoke, his scent. It silenced me completely. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, threaded with control. "Do not look at me as though you are the injured one, Miss Winter," he said. "Your father's sins have not vanished with his ashes." I tried to shout through the cloth, but only a muffled sound escaped, half sob, half snarl. He leaned close enough for the light to catch the line of his jaw, the faint scar beneath his chin, the kind that spoke of old duels won. "You think me cruel," he continued, his tone like polished steel. "I am not. Were I cruel, I would not have left you breathing." My breath caught behind the gag. I wanted to tell him that I didn't want his mercy, that mercy meant nothing when given by a murderer. But my words stayed caged, trapped like I was. His eyes lingered on me, not with lust nor pity, but something colder, a kind of curiosity that felt almost inhuman. Then, without another word, he turned and left. The heavy door closed with a sound, like a tomb sealing shut. That night I couldn't sleep. The torchlight outside my cell had burned low, and in its trembling glow I watched dust drift through the air like falling stars. I counted the seconds by the beat of my heart until new voices began to echo from beyond the wall. I crept to the bars, pressing my ear to the chill iron. "It was clear as day," Iris's voice murmured. "The villagers saw Rayon storm away from the Alpha's estate. He threatened Lord Woodstone, said he'd regret his neglect of the people." "And an hour later my father was dead," James replied, his tone low, restrained. "What conclusion would you have drawn?" The word father caught sharply in his throat, like something too painful to swallow. In that instant, I heard grief in his voice, not hatred, a son's wound still bleeding under all that command. "My lord," Iris said after a pause, "vengeance does not always yield truth." James's reply was quiet. "A kingdom built on unpunished betrayal rots from its heart, Iris. I seek justice, not vengeance. The two look alike only to those who fear both." Their footsteps faded, but their words stayed with me, heavy and confusing. Could a killer speak with such sorrow? Could cruelty sound so calm? Hours later, softer voices stirred again, not James's this time. Iris spoke with another guard, her tone hushed and hesitant. "She doesn't belong here," Iris whispered. "She's young, frightened. If the Alpha saw her properly, he'd see it too." "And risk defying him," the man muttered. "You've gone mad, Iris. Don't let pity dig your grave." Silence, then Iris's quiet answer. "Perhaps pity is all that separates us from monsters." The words tightened something inside me. I turned away from the bars, staring into the dim light of my cage. If pity still lived here, maybe hope did too. But I didn't sleep. Not until the first gray light touched the frost on the stones. Morning crept in like an intruder. The manor outside stirred, faint footsteps, clinking metal, the crackle of fires rekindling. I pushed myself upright, dizzy from hunger and exhaustion. The floor was damp. Condensation from the night gathered in small puddles. As I turned, my foot slipped on the slick stone. I fell, my cheek striking the wall with a dull thud. The sting was sharp, hot. When I lifted my hand, there was blood on my palm. But as I watched, it vanished. The wound closed before my eyes, leaving smooth skin behind. Only a faint warmth remained. For a moment, I could not move. Fear, not of him but of myself, rooted me still. Then I heard it, the sound of boots again. James stood in the doorway, silent as a shadow. His gaze went from my face to the floor, then back. He had seen everything. "What did I just witness?" he asked, stepping closer. I said nothing, my heart hammered like a trapped bird. He reached out, untied the cloth from my mouth, and let it fall. The air on my lips felt like freedom. "Are you a healer?" he asked. No accusation now, only controlled curiosity. I hesitated. A lie might save me now, but truth might buy me time. I nodded once. His eyes narrowed. "Healers are rare, rarer still among humans." "I'm not rare," I said hoarsely, "just unfortunate." A faint line appeared between his brows, as if the answer offended him. "Unfortunate," he repeated. "That depends on the choices one makes." "My father made none that deserved death," I said, voice shaking. The words tore out of me before I could stop them. He exhaled slowly, the motion betraying more weariness than anger. Your father accused mine of neglecting the villagers. He said our patrols failed, that our protection was a lie. That was his last conversation before my father was found lifeless in his own hall. So your justice is built on a rumor and a quarrel, I said bitterly. James's jaw tightened. There were witnesses. There are always witnesses, I replied, and none who truly see. Something flickered in his eyes, not fury, not yet, but the edge of it. You dare speak to me like this in your state? Innocence dares everything, I said quietly. You can cage a body, not a truth. He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether my defiance was courage or madness. Finally, he said, I will prove it. I will prove that Rayon Winter destroyed my father. And if you fail? I asked. He turned toward the door, his back straight, his voice controlled. Then I will resign my title as Alpha. For the first time, I believed him. He reached the threshold, paused, and looked back at me. There was something softer now, something human. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps respect. You're a healer, he said quietly. Then heal your hatred before it consumes you. He left. The echo of his boots faded into the long corridor. I sank to the floor, my fingers trembling. The cell felt the same, but I was not. My heart beat harder, faster, not from fear, but from a strange, reckless hope. I touched my cheek again. The skin was smooth, the wound forgotten. But I remembered. I was not helpless anymore. And somewhere behind these walls, a man who believed himself righteous had just made me a promise. The truth would break him. Or heal us both. Morning came softly, the way forgiveness sometimes does, quiet, almost believable. I woke to the sound of a key turning, the rasp of metal that once meant dread. When the door swung open, it was Iris, her expression unreadable, 2 soldiers at her back. The Alpha has given orders, she said. Her tone held no cruelty now, only duty, perhaps a hint of apology. She stepped aside, and for the first time in days, I crossed the threshold of my cell. The corridor stretched before me, long and echoing, lined with sconces that burned low. Smoke trailed lazily toward a high-vaulted ceiling, where old cobwebs glimmered like thin silver lace. The air smelled of cedar and steel polish, and somewhere beneath that, the faintest trace of pine and cold rain, his scent. Each step I took felt stolen. The stones were cool under my bare feet, but I refused to shiver. Let them see I could walk without trembling. We climbed a staircase, the kind carved by wealth, each step edged with iron vines. Iris stopped before a tall door of dark oak, carved with wolves and constellations. This room is yours, she said quietly. Mine. The word struck me strange. When the latch clicked, warm air rolled out, firelight, lavender oil, the soft crackle of logs. A bed draped in velvet, a window with sunlight, a basin with steaming water. It felt unreal, as if someone else's life had been set waiting for me. I stepped inside. The soldiers left. Iris lingered. Her gaze softened when it found my face. Eat when they bring food, she murmured, and speak softly if he visits. He listens more than he talks. Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. I stood in the middle of the chamber, listening to the silence breathe. For the first time since the fire, there was no smell of ash, no smoke clinging to my skin. I touched the window latch and pushed. Cold air flooded in, sharp as truth. Outside, mist curled above the forest. Somewhere beyond, that mist lay the grave I couldn't reach. A knock sounded, not a question, a command. He entered without waiting. James Woodstone. Alpha Mafia monster. Every title suited him, none defined him. He wore dark wool trimmed with silver thread, his hair tied back loosely, his gloves still dusted with snow. Even the light seemed to bend around him, cautious not to touch too much. You'll stay here, he said. Behind my quarters, easier to find you when you're needed. His tone was businesslike, as if moving a pawn on a board. "How generous," I said, forcing calm. His eyes flicked to mine, pale gray, storm-ringed. "Your comfort is a matter of practicality," he said. "A healer must rest." "Practical," I echoed. "Yes." He lingered as though expecting gratitude, then turned toward the door. "Do not mistake this for kindness, Miss Winter. I reward usefulness, not sorrow." And he left me with the fire, the warmth, and the coldest words I'd ever heard. Breakfast arrived soon after, a tray carried by a young maid whose hands shook more than mine. On it, warm bread, berries, roasted meat, honey tea. The smell made my stomach tighten. I hadn't eaten since the night before my father. I forced myself to eat slowly, tasting each bite as if testing memory. The bread was soft, not coarse like ours, the honey sweet enough to hurt. I should have been grateful. Instead, guilt sat heavy in my throat. I saw my father's face, thin with years of giving me the larger share. He destroyed my home, I thought, and now I dine on his table. But anger would not feed me. Survival would. So I ate and I planned. They would see me smile, obey, become the perfect guest. And when they forgot to fear me, that would be the beginning. Later, Iris returned with folded gowns. "The Alpha requests you wear these," she said. Fine fabrics, linen, silk, a blue dress trimmed with white thread. I touched the cloth. It felt like water compared to my old skirts. "Does he always dress his prisoners?" I asked. Her lips pressed thin. "You're not a prisoner, not anymore." "Then what am I?" She hesitated. "An investment." The word sliced cleaner than any insult. I smiled so she wouldn't see it sting. The summons came at midday. I was led down a long corridor lined with glass windows, where sunlight spilled across the marble. At the far end, a pair of soldiers waited beside a man sprawled on a couch, his shirt soaked dark near the shoulder. A deep claw mark marred the skin, already infected, smelling faintly of iron. James stood beside him, gloved hands clasped behind his back. When I entered, his gaze found mine and didn't move. "Healer," he said simply, "prove it." My knees nearly buckled, not from fear but from the weight of eyes around me. Still, I walked forward. The wounded man winced. It's fine, Alpha." "It isn't," James cut in. "Be still." I knelt. The smell of blood, the tremor of pain, it drew something from deep within me. I placed my palm over the wound, closing my eyes, remembering the forest, the way my father once said the earth heals itself if you let it breathe. I breathed. Warmth gathered beneath my hand, a pulse that wasn't only mine. A pale gold light shimmered through my fingers. The torn flesh knit together like silk mending in slow motion. When it was done, the man gasped, flexed his arm, and whispered, "By the goddess." Silence filled the hall. Only the crackle of torches moved. James spoke at last. "Remarkable." There was awe there, but also calculation, the look of a man measuring what he might control. "He'll live," I said. "That's all that matters." "No," he answered softly. "You matter now." The words unsettled me more than threat ever could. By evening, I was summoned again, this time not as healer but guest. The grand dining hall glowed with chandeliers strung with glass drops that caught firelight. I had never seen such brightness indoors. At the long table sat his inner circle. Lord Elric, gray-haired, warm-eyed, his laughter soft like an uncle. Iris, seated beside him, shoulders straight, eyes lowered. Two captains, both scarred and solemn. And at the head, James, a dark statue against gold light. When I entered, conversation halted. Every gaze turned, weighing me as though I'd stepped into sacred ground. James gestured to an empty seat beside Iris. "Join us," he said. "A healer eats among those she protects." I walked forward, feeling the rustle of my borrowed gown. Each step echoed too loud. Elric rose briefly, smiling. "You've given us a miracle today, Lady Healer. You have our thanks." I murmured something polite. Iris poured wine into my cup, without meeting my eyes. The food was exquisite, stew rich with herbs, fruit soaked in honey, warm bread that broke like cloud. I ate small bites, listening to their talk of borders, trade, and pack matters I didn't yet understand. Once, I caught James watching me instead of his meal. Our eyes met, briefly, dangerously. Something electric moved between us, the kind that burns quietly. He looked away first. After dinner, he stood. "This house owes Miss Winter a debt," he said. "She will remain here not as captive, but as healer to my people. She will have what she needs, and she will not leave these walls." The hall murmured approval. My stomach turned. Not a cage, but no freedom either. I bowed my head in false gratitude. Inside, a single thought whispered, "Every gilded cage still has a lock, and locks can break." That night I sat by my window, watching snow drift across the courtyard. The fire burned low, the air smelled of pine and rain. Below, I could hear the guards changing posts, the low bark of a hound. Somewhere deeper in the manor, laughter, then silence. I traced the frost on the glass with my fingertip. Outside lay a world I once called mine. Inside lay comfort, warmth, food, safety, bought with obedience. I was freer than before, yet still owned. He called it mercy. I called it debt. A shadow passed the doorway, tall, unmistakable. He paused, perhaps listening. I didn't turn. I wanted him to know I knew he was there. After a moment, his footsteps moved away. I smiled to the dark. The game had begun. And in games, patience wins more than power ever will. There is a sound a house makes when it is getting ready for war. It is not the clash of steel you see in stories. It is a lower, more patient noise, the creak of floorboards as men move in measured lines, the rustle of canvas, the soft thump of men packing saddlebags. In the early hours, when the manor still wore sleep around its shoulders, that sound vibrated through the stone and seemed to settle into my bones. I had learned the sound as if by apprenticeship. For weeks I had remained behind a plate of polished wood and a basin of water, tending the hurt, the harried, the broken. The hands that once fed me spoons of thin broth now thrust bandages and splints into mine. Men came to me with wounds earned in patrols and trade disputes, and I mended them in the quiet of my chamber. The work soothed me on nights when memory rose like smoke. A stitch, a breath, a pressure of palm, the slow stitch of skin closing like tide coming in. It felt like justice of a small sort, making whole what the world had split. The manor's rhythm had shifted to a quicker tempo. I knew why before anyone said it aloud. Rumors travel fast on cold wind. Horses take secrets farther than lips do. The servants whispered it over pitchers. Iris spoke of it when she thought I would not listen. Cody Finns was making trouble. The name had the scrape of a stone edge. Cody from the next lands over, a rival Alpha, a man who paced his borders like a dog marking fence posts. Where he walked, borders frayed and promises, brittle already, blew away. I did not know much about Alpha politics. I knew enough to keep my head bowed when Lord Elric and his captains argued over maps. I knew enough to watch James when he stood at the windows and listened to wind in the pines as if the trees themselves spoke of strategy. What I did not expect was that the battle creeping toward our borders would be measured not in proud banners, but in the slow, cruel theft of what kept people alive. Livestock, seed stores, animals taken at night, goats, hens, pigs, hundreds. It came, the truth, in a cautioning voice from a courier and the quiet confirmation in James's eyes the next morning. He was more grave than the winter had any right to make him. "They are smuggling livestock," he told Iris and me, and when he said it, his words fell like small stones into a pool and made a widening ring of concern. 1,000 heads at least, stolen from our villages, from the people under my watch. He watched me when he said, "my watch." I felt the weight of ownership in that possessive. He did not mean coin or land alone. He meant the people whose daily breath rose and fell in gardens and cottages. He had always insisted his was a protection that required payment, sometimes in coin, sometimes in obedience. Now that protection was tested in a way I felt in the marrow of my bones. If wolves were supposed to guard the fold, then who guards the fold from wolves? I could have kept my head down and let men with swords decide who lived and who died. That would have been the safer path. Instead, something smaller and more dangerous kindled in me. I had secrets besides the way I could mend a tendon or close a cut. I had maps, not of battle plans, but of my life, the small places that stitched my father and me into the world. I had scribbled notes and names people would not remember, and I was collecting proof in a way that required patience rather than bravery. I went to records where a curious servant would let my fingers search old ledgers. I questioned those who had more memory than money, and I tucked receipts and witness names into folds in my dress. Proof is a slow thing, like coaxing a seed to sprout. It does not shout, it grows. So I planned, not to flee the manor forever, yet, but to gather the truth of what had happened the night my father died. I spread the maps across my small table as though I laid out a private country, drawing lines from the village to the estate and beyond, tracing the routes men took on market day, the hidden tracks through fields where a goat might be led away unseen. I marked houses, witnesses, the distance between the point where Rayon's goat was last seen and James's house. I wrote down times, the rhythm of wagons, the names of those who saw figures in the dark. Sometimes at night I traced the same lines until the ink felt like a path pressed into my palm, and I could almost smell the well water and the smoke of our hearth. Those maps were both a comfort and a danger. They made plans feel real. They made escape possible in a way the idea of running never had. I knew how men moved through fields, what tracks horses favored in the thaw, where a rider might be seen from the road, but not from a cottage window. Gathering evidence felt like holding a small, sharp light in the dark. Perhaps if I could show more than rumor, if I could present names and receipts and routes, then the web of accusation that had strangled my father might unravel. On the third day of preparing my small coffers of proof, with a candle guttering low and my hat tucked beside me like a small relic, I heard the approach of boots down the corridor. I had managed to keep the maps hidden beneath the mattress. The knock was a single, metallic report that stilled my breath. Before I could hide them further, the door swung open and James stepped in, unexpected in how unassuming he looked. No parade of guards, no flourish of a cloak, just the man who had overturned my life, all quiet authority and winter-fine composure. My hands were still on a folded map when he cleared his throat. Heat flared immediately at the base of my skull, as if the room itself had become dangerously small. "What are these?" he asked, his voice even. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded as if he had known, as if he had been waiting to discover my small rebellion. "Just planning," I answered too quickly, "for the war." He lifted one brow with the slightest of motions. The map in my hands, a child's scrawl of roads and names to someone who understood them, was a dangerous thing in the presence of a man trained to see paths and traps. "Nice," James said, stepping closer until the candlelight struck the plane of his cheek. "But you are not allowed to plan anything." There it was, the silent assertion of ownership again. A man's right, in James's world, to declare what others might do with their steps. I swallowed. "I am a great planner," I said, smooth on the edge. "Sharp, smart, you need my planning, at least listen." For a moment I half believed my own bravado. It steadied me as if I had wrapped a cloak around my shoulders. He looked at me, and in his face I could read something else besides command. Curiosity, almost amusement. There was a flicker of a calculation, something that said he weighed my words like coins, turning them to see if they were genuine. "Smart move," he said at last, and I let myself breathe when his tone did not curdle into contempt. "But you were planning to escape, not war. You need to understand, you cannot escape from here." His words should have closed my throat. Instead, an oily heat of defiance rolled through me. "Would you like to try me?" I said, my voice thin. I was small in my own mouth, but the sound that came back was something like challenge. It startled even me. "No time for that." He gave a short, almost impatient exhale. "I am here to inform you that you will be ready tomorrow. My soldiers will arrive injured and you will heal them." It should have been a command. It was, but it carried another weight. He did not simply plan for battle. He planned for casualties and for who would stand at the threshold of life and mend those ripped by it. He looked at me as if appointing a steward, perhaps thinking to secure me with the only commodity I offered. "I always do," I said. "What's new?" He did not smile. He simply said, "Not one or two. There will be hundreds, hour upon hour. Bring yourself to it." A cold laugh escaped me before I meant it. "I can handle that. Don't worry." He stepped closer, so near that I could see the thin scar near his lip and the dust clinging to his lashes. He breathed the air of the room as if it held news. "Collect whatever you want," he added then, a change in tone like a shift of weather. "Just know this, you will be destroyed the moment you step outside these walls." The caution landed like a stone in the quiet. Not a threat, though it wore that shape, a guarantee, firm and absolute. I palpated the maps beneath my hand like a talisman. Before I could answer, he turned away. His boots did not creak. They cut the space open as he left. The door closed softly. When the corridor fell silent again, I exhaled, and the sound was a whisper of snow melting. His words burned and glowed like coals under ash. Destroyed the moment I stepped outside. There was no loophole offered, no mercy dangling beyond the gate. Still, his permission to collect what I wanted was a shard of daylight. It meant that somewhere in his mind, he believed the gathering of facts might be worth what he would spare. Or perhaps he thought allowing me a rearguard would keep me docile. I could not know which. I did know this. He had given me both a leash and a pen. I would use both. The next morning the manor filled with noise that felt like a tide. Riders came back from the border with bodies staggered and pale, and those who remained prepared. It was not the grotesque fury of battle we tell in tales. The scene resembled instead a place overwhelmed by the logistics of care. Men who had roared at markets now limped through corridors, breath sucked short, eyes glazed with the fog of pain. The first group arrived before the sun had fully cleared the treetops. A stretcher came creaking into the hall, borne by two red-faced men who coughed and spat frost. I held the bandage I'd been given, set out bowls of warm water, and readied the little herbs kept beneath my bed. There was a cadence to it all, a rhythm that felt like the pulse of some great organism. Each one of them bore marks of the same story. A wild scrap in the flank, a rope burn across a shoulder, a wound that had been stitched by hands more intent on speed than care. Some limped, some slept between breaths. Each looked up at me with the same flicker of the same need. Make it stop, keep me whole. I knelt beside the first man, a young wolf with a jaw full of stubbornness. I set my palms at the torn skin, and the sensation rose like a remembered chorus. I breathed and let the warmth travel. Lightness flowed through my hands into him, like gentle tide through reeds. The wound closed beneath my touch, sutures knitting invisible threads. He coughed and smiled, tears quiet at the corner of his eyes. "Bless you," he whispered, and his voice broke under gratitude. The second man arrived with a deeper wound, a gash that had been wrapped in rough cloth until infection tried to claim it. My fingers moved quickly, clean, cutting slew away, unwrapping with steady hands. The smell of infection was a rotten thing that burned my nose, but I had a remedy, a poultice of willow and ash, brewed low and long, with a touch of honey for the skin's own appetite. I pressed it into place and watched as fever drained like stew from the pot. Hour followed hour, bandages piled like soft clouds on a table. My arms ached with movement, yet with each healing something in me steadied. Men's eyes met mine with that odd gratitude that feels like prayer and fear braided together. James came and went in that day like weather, sometimes at my shoulder, sometimes distant at his maps with Iris, speaking 2 words into a man's ear and watching how the plan folded. By afternoon, our little infirmary looked more like a living thing waking. Beds rearranged, soldiers murmuring, a captain praising I don't know which god. Iris moved with quiet efficiency, bringing hot broth and more bandages, leaning close sometimes to offer a brief instruction. She watched me with an expression I could not read that day, pity, perhaps, or calculation, or something softer that I let myself hope for only at the edges of sanity. At one point, James paused in the doorway and looked at the room. He did not speak. He watched the work of hands and mouths and the blessing that passed between us, and then he met my eyes. In that look was 1,000 tiny things, approval, assessment, and the faintest glimmer of something like respect. He inclined his head once. "You keep too many secrets," he said quietly when he lingered at my side later, away from the men who slept. Make sure the right ones are found when the time comes. I would have laughed at that had I not been shaking with exhausted adrenaline. You meant the maps, I said. He did not deny it. Keep what you must, he said, but remember why you are here. To heal, I answered. It was part truth, part promise. And to serve the house that keeps you. His voice contained the room's cold again. Do not imagine your usefulness buys you the world. The days that followed blurred into the rhythm of tending and mending. The front of the manor brimmed with men preparing horses, sharpening blades, murmuring names into lists, and tracing lines on parchment with the stern gravity of men who hold lives in their hands. James argued strategy in low voices. Iris left instructions in brisk, efficient notes that always found me somehow. At night, when the men had been led to their bunks and the halls sighed with exhaustion, I would unfurl the maps again. Because even as I stitched muscle and sealed skin, I stitched a different kind of mending, that of truth. Names, places, receipts hidden in seams, a neighbor's note folded small, I added each to my secret bundle. The more I gathered, the more I believed there might be a way to unravel what had been pinned to my father like an accusation on a cloak. Sometimes, when the moon was high and the manor held its breath, Iris would appear at the doorway. She would come no closer than the threshold, hands folded, eyes low. You work hard, she would say. Do not let them ruin kindness in you. You think they'll ask too much? I would ask. She would simply nod, and I would see the shadow of a soldier who had given more than he had gotten in return. So I kept my secret and my healing both. The map rolled like a sleeping thing at the bottom of my chest, my hands moving from bandage to ink, from man to manuscript. The war drew nearer by the day in the clack of hooves and the deeper furrow in James's brow, and in the quiet of each evening, I whispered to myself that the proof I gathered would be stronger than rumor, and that if he failed to see it for what it was, then he would have to answer to truth in a way he'd never expected. When at last James stopped by my door on another gray morning, his look was clipped with business. Make ready, he said. Tonight we move toward Cody Finn's. Tonight, I breathed, feeling the tautness of the house tighten. Tonight, he repeated. His hand brushed the maps on my table as he stepped past. The touch was brief, but it told me something more than his words, that he had plans in which I might play a part whether I wished it or not. I watched him go, the door closing like a promise I could not yet read. The maps on my table fluttered as if eager, as if they too felt the rush of a coming wind. I put my hand upon my hat where it lay and thought of a small garden, of my father's hands in the dirt, of a goat ambling under a sun I could not reach. I hummed something of a song he used to whistle and then returned to my work. I would heal, I would gather, and if the house closed its gates against the world in the name of justice, I would make sure justice had the right name to carry. Truth. The night would come soon. The manor would move like a great beast, and men would go where they must. I would bind wounds and bind facts, and in the weaving of both perhaps find the edge I would need. Lunch was always a quiet affair at Wolfstone Manor, quiet, but never calm. The silver spoons and goblets looked beautiful under the soft daylight filtering through the arched windows, but the weight of every eye on the table could crush anyone's appetite. Today, the tension had a sharper edge. James sat at the head of the table as always, straight-backed, expression unreadable. Iris and a few top soldiers filled the seats on his right. I was at the far end, close enough to hear, far enough to feel like a shadow. I was learning to smile at the right time, to eat with grace as if I'd belonged here forever. Pretending was easier when one was hungry, and the bread was warm. Anna, Iris said suddenly, his tone light but his gaze piercing. Are you prepared for tomorrow? I swallowed before answering. I'm always prepared. His lips twitched. To escape. My hand paused midair. For a moment, I met his eyes and saw the faint glimmer of mockery there. To heal, I said evenly. Why would I escape this luxury mansion? I'm lucky to be living here with respect. That word, respect, seemed to cut through the room. James's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He didn't look up at me right away, but the muscle in his jaw tightened before he said quietly, Good. I lowered my gaze and kept eating. The conversation drifted elsewhere, to plans, to the rival Alpha to trade routes, but I barely listened. Beneath the polished surface, every voice carried threat and power. When the plates were cleared, the men rose first. I stayed behind a moment, pretending to finish my wine while my thoughts churned. This table, this strange illusion of peace, was a battlefield of its own. Later in my room, I loosened my hair and sat by the window. The manor grounds glowed pale under the afternoon sun, soldiers trained in the courtyard, their movements sharp, precise. Beyond them, the forest shimmered faintly, the same forest I had once tried to escape through. I was just beginning to drift toward sleep when a knock came. 3 slow taps. When I opened the door, Iris stood there. He didn't enter immediately. "May I?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. I stepped aside. "You can if you tell me what brings you here." He walked in, glancing once around the room as if checking for secrets. "What are you planning, Anna?" "Planning," I echoed. "I just finished lunch. I was planning a nap." His eyes narrowed. "You don't want to get out?" I laughed softly. "Of course not. This is my dream life. Why would I ruin it?" He studied me for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his tone was quieter. "What about your father?" I let my gaze fall to the floorboards. "He might have killed James's father." "Might have," Iris repeated slowly. "That's an interesting word for a daughter to use." He took a step closer. "Are you planning something else then? Maybe coming closer to the Alpha?" The question felt like a blade wrapped in velvet. I raised my chin. "You want me to do that?" "Not at all," he said quickly, and a smile curved at the corner of his lips. "Because James isn't interested in you, and I'd have to destroy you if you tried. I don't want any obstacles." My heart stuttered, but I refused to look away. "I'm not." "You're not," he said, voice soft now, "but you will be." "Is that a threat?" "It is a brutal threat." The silence that followed was too intimate, too heavy. Then his expression changed, something sly creeping into his smile. "Why don't you give me a chance?" My breath caught. Chance about what? He let the distance between us dissolve until he stood close enough for me to feel his breath. "We could be at the top," he murmured. "Top," I repeated, "above the Alpha." His eyes gleamed. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers hovering a breath away from my hand. "Possibly." For a heartbeat, the air burned between us, his gaze holding mine, his hand never touching but close enough to make my pulse tremble. Then, just as suddenly, he straightened, a faint smirk crossing his face. "Think about it," he said, and turned to leave. When the door closed behind him, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my palms clammy. My mind spun with the echo of his words. Above the Alpha. If Iris truly meant what I thought he did, then this house wasn't just a prison. It was a storm waiting to happen. And somehow, I was standing right at its center. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the hallway made me flinch. I heard soldiers, boots, the low murmur of guards changing shifts, the manor breathing in silence. At last, unable to stay still, I took a candle and slipped into the corridor. The halls were long and echoing, portraits watching from every wall. I wandered until I reached the old gallery. The door was ajar, and the smell of parchment and wax drifted out. Inside, the room glowed with firelight, and James stood by the far window, studying a map spread across a carved table. He turned at the faint sound of my step. "You walk quietly," he said. I couldn't sleep. His eyes moved to the candle trembling in my hand. "The manor isn't safe for wandering at night." "From what? Your soldiers?" He smiled faintly. "From ghosts." That caught me off guard. Ghosts. He walked toward me, his boots silent on the rug. "Every stone here remembers something. My ancestors built this place centuries ago. Each generation added its own sins." The way he said it, sins, made my skin prickle. "It's beautiful," I said softly, "for a haunted house." He looked at me then, really looked, as if the faint sarcasm had surprised him. "You don't fear this place." "I fear what lives in it, not its walls." His gaze lingered for a long, unreadable moment. "You're not like the others," he said finally. Most who live under my roof keep their eyes on the floor. Maybe I should learn, I said. It's safer that way. He turned back to the window. Safety is an illusion, Anna. You're safer here than anywhere else, and yet you plan to escape. My heart stilled. You think I'd be foolish enough to try again? I know you, he said simply. You want answers, and you don't stop until you get them. He wasn't wrong. What would you do, I asked quietly, if you found out your father's killer was someone else? He faced me again. The firelight drew shadows across his face, half angel, half wolf. I would destroy them, he said, no matter who they were. The promise in his voice sent a chill through me. I nodded, stepping back. Then I'll pray you discover the truth soon. For a moment, the air between us shifted, something less hostile, more fragile. Then he said, almost gently, "Good night, healer." "Good night, Alpha." I turned and left, the echo of his voice following me down the hall. Back in my room, the candle flame trembled as I set it down. I sat beside the window again, the forest whispering beyond the glass. Iris's words haunted one side of my mind, his near touch, his promise of power. James's voice haunted the other, quiet, dangerous, almost human when he spoke of ghosts. Somewhere between the two men lay my path. And whatever I chose would decide not just my fate, but the fate of this entire manor. As the candle burned lower, I whispered to the night, "I will survive this, Father, one way or another." The flame flickered, as if it heard me, and went out. The candle's flame gave one last sigh before it died. The room fell into a darkness so complete it felt alive, breathing softly against the walls, whispering in the corners where the moonlight did not reach. I lay still beneath the coarse blanket, my eyes tracing the ceiling I could barely see, waiting for sleep that refused to come. Something in the air was wrong. The silence had weight to it, like a held breath. I could smell faint smoke and iron, an omen scent, the kind that clings before storms or before death. Then I heard it. A small metallic sound. Not from the kitchen, not from the courtyard. A lock turning slowly, careful not to echo. My heart leapt. I sat up, wrapping my shawl around my shoulders, then reached for the hat that still carried my father's scent, old leather and pine. I placed it on my head like a charm and slipped my bare feet onto the cold stone floor. Outside, the corridor waited in blue shadows. Moonlight spilled through the stained glass windows in stripes of red and violet, painting the dust in drifting color. The portraits of past alphas lined both walls, men with eyes that followed the living. I moved carefully, each step measured. The floor creaked once beneath my heel, and I froze, listening. Voices. 2 of them. I slid behind one of the marble pillars, just as the lantern glow reached the corner. "I'm telling you," a rough voice said. "Cody's spies are everywhere. Someone's feeding him information. The Alpha trusts too easily." I recognized the second voice instantly, Iris. Cool, certain. "James trusts those who prove loyalty," he said. "You'd do well not to question him." The soldier hesitated. And the girl, Rayon's daughter, she. The sharp scrape of steel leaving its sheath silenced him. "Speak her name again," Iris warned, "and you'll regret it. She's under the Alpha's protection." The soldier swallowed his words and backed down the hall. Iris stood alone for a moment, the lantern trembling in his hand. Then he set it down, struck a match, and lit a single candle on the wall sconce. Its flame flickered over his face, beautiful, dangerous, unreadable. "I'll finish it before James knows," he murmured. I pressed my back against the pillar, breath caught in my throat. Finish what? Before I could think, Iris turned and walked toward the east wing, the forbidden one. I followed. The corridor narrowed the farther it went, the ceiling lowering as if the house itself didn't want intruders. The air grew colder, thicker. At the end waited a door, iron-bound, half open. Inside, light flickered. James knelt before an iron chest, a single torch burning behind him. His armor was half-buckled, his cloak thrown aside. He looked like a shadow given human shape, strong yet burdened. He opened the chest and lifted a folded parchment. His voice was barely a whisper. "Father, I'll find who betrayed you." The words weren't anger. They were grief carved into breath. I froze. The parchment bore a crest I knew, the twin crescent of the Woodstone line, engraved once on my father's ring. My blood ran cold. James straightened slightly, and his head turned just enough for moonlight to touch his profile. The air shifted. His nostrils flared. Wolf instincts. "Who's there?" The golden spark flared in his eyes like caught firelight. I didn't wait. I ran. My skirts brushed the floor, my breath came sharp, echoing through stone corridors. The portraits blurred past like accusing ghosts. Behind me, a door creaked open. A low growl followed, half human, half something more. But when I reached the main hall again, the sound stopped. Only the echo of my own heartbeat filled the emptiness. Then the bell rang. It tolled once, twice, thrice, each note deep enough to shake dust from the rafters. The whole manor woke at once. Guards shouted, boots struck stone, horses neighed outside. I ran to the window. Below, the courtyard burned with motion. Torches flared, banners whipped in the night wind, and armor flashed beneath the rising moon. At the center sat James, fully armored now in black leather inlaid with silver trim, his cloak dark as smoke. "For my father," his voice rang across the stones. "For the Woodstone pack, no mercy." He mounted his stallion. The beast reared, hooves striking sparks. The gates opened. The army thundered out. And then, silence, save for the fatting rhythm of hooves and the heartbeat of drums from afar. Guards ushered me toward the healer's hall, a long room lit by torches and lined with empty cots. The smell of herbs and oil hung thick in the air. "Stay here," one ordered. "They'll bring the wounded." So I waited. Minutes stretched, then at last the door burst open. Two soldiers carried a third between them, blood staining his tunic, eyes half closed. I rushed forward, rolling up my sleeves. "Lay him there." They obeyed, panting. I pressed my hands to the man's wound. Warmth spread under my palms, golden, faint, the pulse of my gift. He gasped, then steadied. His skin closed beneath the light as if time itself obeyed me. Another pair stumbled in, a limping man clutching his arm, whispering, "Alpha fights near the east gate. Cody's wolves came through smoke." I didn't need to see the battle. It lived in their words. The clang of steel and the shouts outside told the rest. Every sound arrived muffled, as though the war was breathing just beyond the wall. The crash of hooves, the crackle of fire, the chorus of roars and orders. More wounded came. I moved between them, wrap, press, breathe, heal. One man's chest would not rise until I pressed my palms there and begged whatever power loved me still to listen. It did. He coughed, then thanked me through tears. The air grew stifling. Torches hissed as sweat dripped onto stone. And then the flow stopped. The door stayed closed. The hall went still again. I wiped my hands on the apron and waited, but no one came. Even the war outside seemed to retreat to a distant rumble. Something inside me refused the silence. I grabbed my shawl, the pouch of herbs, and my small basket of water-soaked cloths. "If the wounded won't come," I whispered, "I'll go to them." The guards outside the door tried to protest, but I was already moving. The night beyond the manor was smoke and wind. The fields stretched open, washed in orange light from burning torches in the distance. The sky itself looked bruised. The sound of battle was clearer now, steel striking steel, wolves growling, the thunder of hooves pounding the soil. I walked fast, my skirt catching briars, until the first silhouette appeared ahead. A soldier collapsed against the grass, hands pressed to his ribs. I ran, kneeling beside him. "You're safe," I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. His eyes fluttered open. "The healer, the Alpha, said you'd come." "I'm here." I pressed my palms against the wound. Warmth surged through the air between us, gold rippling over red. His breathing steadied. "Stay still, help will come." I looked over my shoulder, searching. From the edge of the woods came 3 women, village wives, frightened but willing, their skirts muddy, faces pale. "Help me carry him," I called. Together, we lifted the soldier's weight, dragging him toward the manor. By the time we reached the steps, 2 more men stumbled into view, both bleeding, both half-conscious. I healed them too, slowly, painfully. My head ached from the drain of energy, but the sight of their eyes reopening gave me strength. For hours it went like this: heal, drag, breathe, heal again. The night became a rhythm of light and darkness. Once, while kneeling beside a dying man, I looked up and saw the ridge between the manors glowing with firelight. There, riding through the smoke, was James. His blade caught the moon. Wolves ran at his side, their bodies black silhouettes against the flames. His voice carried faintly through the distance, low and commanding, unyielding. For a heartbeat, I thought he turned toward me, and I whispered his name. But he was already gone, swallowed by the storm of war. I turned back to the soldier beneath my hands and let the glow of my gift consume the darkness around us. The glow beneath my palms dimmed, leaving only the faint pulse of life under the soldier's ribs. Wind swept the field, carrying the stench of smoke and damp soil. In the distance, the moon was half-veiled by clouds, a wounded coin hanging over the manor roofs. When I rose, my legs trembled. The women who had helped me were already hauling another body from the slope. Their faces were ghost-pale, streaked with ash. "Bring him here," I called, my voice hoarse. "There's still time." As we worked, the roar of battle seemed to shift nearer, boots thudding, steel clashing. A sudden howl cut through the air, raw and inhuman. I froze, every hair rising on my neck. Wolves. Not ordinary ones. These were pack soldiers in their shifted form, their outlines vast under the torchlight. One bounded past, dragging a wounded foe between its jaws, disappearing into smoke. Another leapt the fence with a snarl that shook the ground. The women fled back toward the manor gates. I stayed, unable to move. My healer's basket spilled across the dirt, herbs and bandages scattering like pale feathers. From the haze, a figure emerged, half limping, half running. A soldier, armor torn. "Please," he gasped. "The Alpha, he's holding the eastern line. We can't hold long." I knelt, pressing my hands over his side. The familiar warmth sparked again, spilling into his wound. He exhaled shakily. "He fights like fire," he murmured. "But there's treachery, mistress. Someone's guiding Cody's men through the rear passages. They knew every door." My heart stuttered. Every door. The forbidden wing. The map Iris hid. I didn't wait for the soldier to finish. "Stay still," I whispered, rising. "I'll warn him myself." The women called after me, but their voices were already swallowed by the wind as I ran toward the manor. Inside, chaos reigned. Servants darted through smoke-filled corridors, carrying buckets of water. The great doors shook from impacts outside. I hurried through the west hall toward the war chamber, skirts soaked with mud. The air reeked of iron and burning oil. In the archway ahead, I glimpsed a fallen guard, one of James's men clutching something in his hand. I knelt, prying his fingers open. A parchment. Stained and torn, but unmistakable, a map of the manor. My pulse hammered. It was the same layout I'd seen Iris folding days ago. The same markings near the east gate, the secret tunnels marked with crimson ink. Footsteps thundered nearby. I shoved the parchment into my pocket and sprinted down the corridor, past the armory where smoke crept from under the door. The main doors burst open. Wind howled through the entrance, scattering ashes and banners. James strode in, his sword dripping with rain and soot. Armor dented, eyes burning gold. "Close the gates," he roared to the guards. "Don't let a single wolf through." Then he saw me mud-stained, breathless, clutching the map to my chest. "Anna." "James, listen." I stumbled forward. "It's Iris, he's the traitor. He gave Cody the map, look." Before I could unfold it, something slammed into my back. The world spun. Pain flared bright as fire, then dimmed into ringing silence. I fell to the floor. The map fluttered from my hand. Through the haze, I saw the glint of armor Iris, standing behind me, blade drawn. "She made copies," he said coldly. "For Cody's men. I found her trying to flee with them." James's face changed. Shock, disbelief, and then something harder. "That can't be." "She just attacked me, Alpha." Iris's tone was calm, practiced. "I stopped her before she could do worse." James's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, he looked torn between two worlds. Then he barked an order. "Take her inside." Two soldiers lifted me, though their hands trembled. I tried to speak, to tell the truth, but my voice caught in my throat. The pain in my back burned like fire under ice. "James," I whispered. He knelt briefly, eyes searching mine. For a moment I thought he saw the truth there. Then he said quietly, "Don't speak. Save your strength." He lifted me into his arms. The world tilted, torches blurring into streaks of gold and shadow as he carried me back into the manor. The war still raged outside, shouts and howls echoing through the stone like distant thunder. Inside, only his footsteps filled the silence. He laid me on the long oak table in the grand hall. My vision swam. Everything smelled of smoke and rain. "Stay with me," he muttered, pressing his hands over my chest. "Breathe, Anna, breathe." The weight of his palms was steady, desperate. Warmth pressed against me, urging air into my lungs. My body responded, slowly, painfully. I gasped, the breath scraping like gravel in my throat. Relief flashed in his eyes. "That's it, you're safe." Safe? The word rang hollow. I felt his touch still on my chest, and when my strength returned, fury came with it. I slapped him. The sound cracked through the empty hall. He froze, half kneeling beside me, eyes darkening. "Are you mad? You just struck an alpha." "You pressed your hand on me without asking," I hissed. "I should destroy you for that." He blinked, then exhaled, jaw tight. "I was trying to save your life." "Oh, the same life you believed a traitor." His tone softened. "I was scared if I lost you, who would heal my men." "Your concern is touching," I said bitterly. "You burn my house, kill my father, cage me, and now claim fear of losing me." James's gaze sharpened. "Don't twist this, you betrayed me." I did not. He gestured toward the crumpled map on the floor. "That says otherwise." "I found it," I shouted, pain flaring up my spine. "Iris had it first. He's lying to you." He stepped back, expression unreadable. "Iris has fought beside me since boyhood. He saved my life twice. And you," he gestured to me, trembling but defiant. "You came from nowhere, from the man who murdered my father." My father was innocent. The walls caught the echo of my scream and threw it back in whispers. James's eyes flickered gold again, his wolf close beneath the surface. "Then prove it." "I will." He turned sharply, cloak snapping behind him as he strode to the door. "James," I called after him, "if I prove Iris is guilty, what then?" He paused at the threshold. "Then I'll resign my title of Alpha," he said without looking back. "But if you fail, pray the moon takes you first." The door slammed. The silence that followed was worse than the war outside. I sat slowly, breath ragged. The torches guttered as wind hissed through the cracks. From far beyond the walls came the distant roars of wolves, the clash of steel. The smell of rain seeped in. I pressed my hand to my wound, closing my eyes. Light bloomed faintly under my skin, knitting flesh together. The pain ebbed away, but the ache in my heart did not. When I could stand, I limped to the door. Locked. I tried again. Nothing. So I leaned my forehead against the cold wood and whispered to no one. "You'll see, Father. I'll clear your name, even if it kills me." Outside, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the battlefield. And as I listened, I realized the war inside me was louder than any storm beyond those walls. When James left me locked within the stone room, silence filled the manor like smoke after fire. The battle outside had quieted to distant shouts, to horns and the thrum of victory drums echoing through the valley. I lay where he had left me, half upon the cold floor, the air still sharp with the scent of burning oil and iron. For a long while I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat. Each pulse seemed louder than the next, until even the walls felt alive with it. I pressed my palms over my ears. The ringing would not stop. Then came the knock. I straightened, every muscle ready to recoil. The latch turned, and a soldier entered, carrying another limp upon his shoulder. The injured man's arm hung down, his sleeve dark with blood and soot. "Lady Anna," the soldier said, his voice uncertain, as though unsure whether to call me by name or title. "The Alpha said you heal." I nodded faintly and cleared the table with shaking hands. The wounded soldier groaned as he was laid upon the wooden surface. His breath rattled, harsh and shallow. I leaned over him, whispering the quiet words that steadied my heart before I called upon what little power I had left. My palms grew warm, light spilled softly between my fingers, pale as dawn through fog. The wound at his shoulder knit together, the bleeding slowed, then ceased. The soldier blinked up at me, dazed. "Bless you, lady." "Rest," I murmured. More came after that. 2, 3, 5, brought in by trembling comrades who still smelled of smoke and fear. My hands shook from exhaustion, yet I kept working. I could not stop. Each man who breathed again was one more piece of proof that I was not a curse, that I still had purpose even here in this manor that had taken everything from me. Outside, the battle's voice faded further into the distance. Only the occasional roar or clash of steel reached my ears. The air turned thick, damp with the scent of rain and smoke. I pushed loose strands of hair from my face and pressed on until my arms went numb. At last, no more came. The door closed. The room dimmed again, save for one flickering candle that refused to die. I sank to the floor beside the table. The wood beneath my cheek was cool and smelled faintly of herbs. I might have slept if not for the sound of approaching boots. They were heavier, more measured, each step deliberate, like someone accustomed to command. "James." The door opened, and there he was, standing in the candlelight. His dark coat was torn at one sleeve, streaked with soot, and his hair, normally combed back in severe order, fell loose over his brow. Yet there was a strange brightness in his eyes, the kind that victory gives to men who have tasted too much loss. "It's over," he said quietly. I forced myself upright. "You've won." He inclined his head. "Cody's men scattered before dawn. His fortress burns. The valley is ours again." Something in the way he said ours made my stomach twist. I waited, thinking, hopping. He might thank me for saving his soldiers. Instead, he crossed the room, his gaze cold now, detached. "You will return to your quarters," he said. "Food and water will be brought to you. You will heal when I command it, nothing more." My voice cracked. "Why?" "Because obedience," he replied softly, "is safer than mercy." He turned away, motioning to the guards at the door. "Please," I said, stepping forward. "Give me one chance to explain, Iris." He halted. His back stiffened, but he did not face me. "Enough, Anna. You trusted the wrong." He raised a hand without turning, silencing me. "The time for explanations has passed." The guards approached. Chains clinked faintly in their hands. I felt my throat tighten. "You think I betrayed you?" "I know what I saw," he said, his tone still calm, almost weary. "Maps in enemy hands, your silence when I questioned you." I had no chance. "I gave you one," he interrupted. "You spat upon it." I wanted to shout, to tell him that Iris was the traitor, that he was blind. But there was something in his eyes, cold grief, worn patience, that told me he would not listen. "Take her back," he said simply. The guards led me through the corridor, the same path I had walked so many nights before. The torches along the walls guttered as we passed, the shadows bending like bowed heads. In the courtyard beyond, soldiers were cheering faintly, raising their swords toward the rising moon. None of them looked at me. To them, I was just a prisoner again, a woman who had once been useful, now merely kept alive for convenience. They locked me within the narrow chamber once more. The iron door closed, heavy as judgment. When their footsteps faded, I sank against the wall. My hands still smelled faintly of the herbs and blood I had touched. The warmth that came with healing had left me, replaced by cold. Outside, faint music drifted from the distant hall, victory songs. I could imagine James there, his soldiers toasting him, Iris smiling at his side. My chest burned. He had promised me nothing, and still he had managed to break it. For a long time, I sat motionless. Then I rose and went to the small window. The courtyard below was strewn with ash and banners, a graveyard for the knight's pride. I whispered to the moon, "You saw, didn't you? You saw the truth he refuses to see." The moon, indifferent, hid behind a cloud. The lock clattered again. A tray was slid through the gap at the bottom of the door. Water, bread, a strip of fruit. I ignored it. Every breath hurt in the same quiet way that hope hurts when it has no place left to live. I thought of my father then, of the way his hands had always smelled of pine bark, of the warmth in his eyes when he said that good men could be misjudged and still remain good. "I will prove it," I whispered. "I will prove you innocent, Father, even if your name must be carved from stone." I drew my knees to my chest and listened to the manor settling into its uneasy sleep. Somewhere far beyond, a door creaked open. Steps echoed down the hall again, slow, cautious. Perhaps a guard changing post, perhaps something else. I did not care anymore. I was too tired to fear. The candle on the far table sputtered once, twice, then steadied. Its small flame painted the iron bars in soft gold. I shut my eyes, but my mind would not rest. Behind my lids, I saw James's face, calm, unreadable, shadowed by that faint sorrow that made me both pity and despise him. Why could he not see? Why must faith always come too late? The air shifted. A faint chill brushed the back of my neck. I opened my eyes. Through the narrow crack beneath the door, I saw a shadow move, a sliver of darkness crossing the faint glow of the outer torch. Someone stood there, not moving, just listening. My heartbeat stuttered. "Who's there?" I whispered. No reply. The shadow shifted again, then stilled. I waited, breath shallow. Finally, the figure moved on, footsteps receding toward the staircase. It might have been a guard. It might have been something else entirely. I did not sleep after that. The night stretched endless, time crawling through the silence like a wounded animal. Every so often, I thought I heard laughter from the upper hall, low, familiar, edged with mockery. Iris's laughter. It wound through the corridors like smoke, faint and poisonous. I pressed my palms against the wall, feeling the cool damp of the stones, grounding myself in the present. "I will not break," I whispered again. And I meant it. Because beneath all the fear and exhaustion, a small ember of defiance still burned in me, the same one my father had kindled when I was a girl. The one James had tried to cage but could not kill. I would endure this night. I would endure every night until the truth rose with the dawn. The manor slept, but its stones still remembered war. Every creak in the corridor felt alive, as though the walls themselves were listening. I had stopped counting the minutes when the sound came again, the faintest click of a lock turning. My head lifted. The door opened, just enough for a shadow to slip through. A lantern's glow bled into the room, soft and amber. A figure stepped inside, face hidden beneath a dark hood and a cloth mask that covered all but the eyes. "Who are you?" I whispered. No answer. The stranger glanced once at the walls, then crouched, unlocking the cage with deliberate care. The iron hinges groaned in protest. "James," I asked, half hope, half fear. Still silence. He gestured for me to rise. Something in his movements, too swift, too sure, set my pulse racing. When I hesitated, he seized my wrist. The grip was firm, not cruel, but strong enough to silence resistance. "Wait," I began, but the cloth of his sleeve brushed my lips as he covered my mouth, and my words drowned against it. He lifted me as if I weighed nothing, slinging me across his shoulder. The room turned upside down, the lantern light swayed, shadows rippled along the ceiling. My heart hammered against my ribs. He carried me through narrow servant corridors I had never seen before. The scent of damp stone and old wine filled the air. Somewhere above, the great hall still echoed faint laughter from soldiers who believed the world safe again. At last, a cold breath of night touched my skin. The door to the outer courtyard creaked open. We stepped into the chill. The wind smelled of pine and ash, the residue of burned banners. Only when the manor's lights dwindled behind us did he stop. He set me on my feet, removed the mask, and raised the lantern. I froze. Iris. He smiled faintly, that familiar soldier's calm now sharpened into something else. Triumph. Well played, I said bitterly, but why me? His expression did not change. Because the war isn't finished. James believes peace can be forged in a night. He forgets how long hatred survives. I rubbed my wrist where his hand had been. You betrayed him. He tilted his head. I outgrew him. The wind stirred the trees. Beyond the ridge, the moon hung pale and merciless. I will strike again before dawn, Iris continued. When his men sleep, I'll remind them what real strength is. James has forgotten our kind were born from conquest, not mercy. You're mad, I said quietly. Madness and vision often share a face. He stepped closer, lantern between us. The light revealed the fine cut of his uniform, once the Alpha's second, now a commander cloaked in rebellion. I will rule this territory, he said, and you, Anna, you will stand beside me. I recoiled. Never. His voice softened, almost persuasive. You think James values you? He cages what he fears. I at least would set you free. A healer at my side, people would follow us without question. You'd give me another cage, I said. He smiled thinly. A gilded one, perhaps, with windows. Before I could answer, he gestured to the darkness behind him. Two men emerged from the tree line, faces half-covered, blades sheathed but ready. Guard her, Iris ordered. If she moves, bind her hands. They nodded. He turned back to me. You'll understand in time. James was my brother in arms, but sentiment weakens the throne. He will fall by dawn. I won't let you. His eyes glinted. Then pray your power can break iron. He walked away, lantern bobbing until the forest swallowed the light. The men forced me forward along a narrow path, roots twisting underfoot. The cold bit through my thin gown. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long, lonely warning. They led me to an old watchtower, half-ruined, half-standing. Its stones were slick with moss, its windows little more than slits. Inside, the air reeked of damp metal and old fires. One of the men fetched a torch. Its light revealed the cage waiting in the corner. I almost laughed. You can't imagine how familiar this feels. They ignored me, pushing me inside. The door clanged shut. Chains rattled as they secured it. When they left, only the torch remained, its flame bending in the draft. I leaned against the cold bars, breathing slow. My wrists throbbed where rope had rubbed them raw. Outside, I could hear Iris giving orders, his voice steady, confident, a man already tasting victory. At dawn, he said, strike when the guards change. Take the northern wall first. Leave no witness who can carry word to James before I arrive. His followers murmured assent. I closed my eyes, picturing the manor, the great stone corridors, the wounded soldiers I had saved, the Alpha who had looked at me as though my truth were poison. He will die believing I betrayed him, I thought, unless I stop this. The torch flickered lower. I pressed my palms together, feeling the faint stir of warmth beneath my skin, the remnant of my healing gift. The ropes burned where I strained against them. The fibers smoked faintly. If I could break free before Iris returned. The wind howled through the cracks in the tower walls. I could hear faint laughter outside, men boasting of what they would become once James fell. I whispered into the dark, You killed his father, didn't you, Iris? No one answered, but the silence seemed to agree. A single ember of rage ignited in my chest. He had deceived everyone. James's fury, my suffering, my father's death, all tangled in his lies. I thought of my father's last words, his voice steady even when afraid. The world hides its wolves well, Anna. Now I saw what he meant. My breath came steadier. I tested the ropes again. They creaked, loosening slightly under the slow burn of my hidden warmth. Time blurred. The torch guttered, painting the walls with long, wavering shadows. Somewhere far off, the manor bells tolled, a distant, hollow sound rolling through the hills. Midnight. Iris's men stirred outside. Boots scraped on stone. I heard Iris himself laughing softly, his confidence unbroken. "When morning comes," he said, "James Woodstone will be nothing but a name whispered in the ashes." My ropes gave way. I froze, listening, no reaction from outside. Carefully, I slipped my wrists free. The marks were raw but bleeding only lightly. The cage door was locked, of course. Iron, thick, sturdy, but the hinges looked old. I wrapped my hands around the bars and whispered the same words I had used to heal broken bone. Energy tingled through my palms, different this time, sharper. Not healing, but heat. Metal groaned, expanding just enough for me to slip one wrist through, then the other. Freedom came quiet as breath. I crept toward the narrow slit of a window. The forest stretched beyond, dark, silvered by moonlight. In the distance, faint fires still burned along the ridge where the last of the battle's debris smoldered. James's manor stood against the horizon, its towers black silhouettes. I pressed my forehead to the stone. "He doesn't know," I whispered. "He doesn't know you plan to kill him." The thought struck me hard enough to bring tears. I turned from the window and searched the room for anything that could serve as a weapon: broken wood, rusted chain, even the torch bracket. Nothing. A faint sound reached me, steps again, softer this time. The door latch clicked. I ducked behind the cage's shadow. The door opened, and Iris stepped in, carrying another lantern. His smile widened when he saw the empty ropes on the floor. "Clever," he said, "but not clever enough." He held up a small vial, its contents gleaming faintly red. "Do you know what this is? Wolf's bane mixed with silver. A single drop could make even an alpha kneel." "You plan to use it on him?" He nodded. "When the guards lower their defenses, I'll strike. You will watch from here, and when it's done, you'll heal me." "I'd rather die." He sighed as though disappointed in a child. "You'll live, Anna. I need you alive. The pack needs a healer when I ascend." He turned to leave. "Iris," I said quietly. He paused at the threshold. "You'll fail," I whispered, "because no throne built on deceit ever stands long." He looked back once, the faintest trace of uncertainty flickering across his face. Then it vanished. "We'll see." He left, locking the door behind him. I sank to the floor, pulse thundering, mind racing. There had to be a way to warn James before dawn. I tore a strip from my sleeve, dipped it into the soot at the edge of the torch, and began to scrawl on the stone floor. Symbols of the old forest tongue my father had once taught me, the ones that could carry meaning through wind and whisper. Danger, betrayal, Iris. When I finished, I closed my eyes and breathed across the markings. The soot shimmered, faintly glowing. Outside, the wind rose, carrying with it a low, almost musical hum, the sound of the message leaving the tower. Would it reach him? I didn't know. But it was all I had. I sank back against the wall, letting exhaustion wash over me. The moon hung high now, its light spilling through the cracks like a silent promise. "I will stop you, Iris," I murmured, "even if I must burn this forest to do it." The torchlight dimmed. The hum of the forest deepened into near silence. And in that silence, I heard one distant, answering howl, low, fierce, and unmistakably familiar. A wolf's voice, far across the valley. "James." My heart leapt. He had heard. The tower's air was heavy with iron and rain. I had spent the long night testing every link that bound me, whispering half-forgotten healing words over the chains until my throat burned. Nothing gave. The guards outside laughed when they heard the clatter, 3 men who believed Dawn would find me still their prisoner. But dawn never came quietly to a cursed place. It began with thunder that was not thunder, the rumble of hooves, the dull percussion of weapons, and faintly, the cry of horns. Another war, or the same one refusing to die. I pressed to the slit of the tower window. Smoke rolled above the pines. Birds scattered eastward. Then nearer came shouting, voices I knew, James's soldiers. Their tones held desperation, not command. I turned, searching the room for anything sharp, anything that might break the rusted hinge. There was only a broken shard of wood and the torch bracket. I jammed it into the lock until splinters filled my palms. The guards outside banged their spears against the door. "Stay still, witch," one growled. But even as he spoke, the ground trembled. Something vast struck the outer wall, dust showered from the ceiling. The guards cursed and ran toward the noise. I pushed harder, wood cracked, hinge screamed, and the door burst open to the corridor. I ran. The smoke of the manor curled through the halls. Shadows of soldiers fled past, dragging wounded men. Somewhere far below, steel met steel in a single, terrible rhythm. I was almost at the courtyard when rough hands seized me. A guard, face masked with soot, pinned my arms. "Back to your cell." I bit his wrist and twisted free. He shouted. Another swung his spear. I ducked and sprinted into the open air, straight into chaos. The field beyond the wall burned in streaks of orange. Figures fought between the trees, shapes of wolves, half-shifted, colliding in flashes of fur and steel. But one figure ran alone toward me, stumbling, cloak torn to ribbons. The guards at the gate laughed. "Look there," one jeered. "The great Alpha flees his own fire." My breath stopped. The man running toward us was James. He limped through the mud, sword dragging, one arm pressed to his ribs. His face, so cold in command, was gray with exhaustion. Yet when his eyes found me, something alive flickered there. He reached the gate, the guards crossed their spears. "You," he gasped. "Anna." They struck him down with the butts of their weapons. He fell to one knee, mud splashing his coat. Even broken, he looked like a lord carved from marble in grief. "Ira said," he murmured, staring up at me, "he had destroyed you." "I wish he had," I said. He gave a sound between a laugh and a sob. "I trusted the wrong one. I should have trusted you." "And now," I whispered, "we will die, both of us." The guards wrenched his sword away and bound his wrists. He did not fight. Perhaps he had nothing left to fight with. When they dragged him to the courtyard center, the night opened wider. From the smoke rode Iris, armor shining, a cruel calm on his face. Beside him came Cody, the rival Alpha whose banners had haunted our borders for months. His eyes were pale, hungry for triumph. They dismounted together, like men arriving at a feast. "I told you," Iris said to Cody. "The Wolfstone line ends tonight." Cody surveyed the ruin of James's fortress, then looked at me, a faint smile playing over his lips. "And what of this one?" "The healer," Iris replied, "his weakness and his curse." Cody laughed softly, then let the curse hang beside him. At his signal, they bound chains around me and James both, thick, cold links that clinked like mockery, and dragged us toward the woods. We did not speak. The path sloped downward into the trees, moonlight flashing between branches. I could hear the distant wolves howling, not in rage now but in hunger. The guards anchored 4 chains between 4 old pines, crossing them until James and I were lifted above the ground, suspended together in the center like offerings. The iron bit my skin, the world tilted beneath us. I could smell the damp moss below, the sweetness of decay. Cody stood beneath the trees, hands clasped behind his back. "There," he said, "let the forest judge its trespassers." I looked at James. His face was calm, eyes half closed, as if listening to something beyond. Perhaps his own defeat, perhaps the ghosts he'd made. "Don't look at me," I whispered. "It's all because of you. I was living a good life and you ruined it." He turned his head slightly, voice low. "Then hate me, Anna, but live." I might have answered, but Cody's laughter broke the air. "Such devotion," he said. "Perhaps we should keep you two hanging until dawn." The guards laughed with him. Then suddenly, he frowned, eyes narrowing on the faint shimmer around my wrists. "What is that light?" I met his gaze. "I am a bigger thing than you think," I said. Don't waste it. He stepped closer. Explain fast. I'm a healer. Lies. Free one of my hands, I said evenly, and watch. Amused, he nodded to a guard. Cut her loose to the elbow. Cold air hit my skin as the chain slackened. Cody rolled up his sleeve, revealing a deep, ragged wound along his forearm, an old blade mark reopened in battle. He held it toward me with a smirk. Fix this. I pressed my palm to the injury. Warmth rose through my fingers, pale light spreading beneath the skin. His breath caught as the torn flesh knit halfway closed, new color returning where there had been gray. When I lifted my hand, the wound was smoother, though not whole. Cody stared, half-healed. I used one hand, I said. Give me food, shelter, respect, and both hands free, and I'll heal 1,000 times better. He studied me, then smiled, an expression that belonged more to hunger than kindness. I like this. Free her. Leave him. The guards obeyed. The chains fell from my shoulders. I stumbled but caught myself on the nearest trunk. James hung still, eyes open but dim. Mud streaked his face, his lip was split. You destroyed my father, I told him quietly. Now this is your fate. Before the words cooled in the air, Cody said, No, this is not. Free him too. The guards hesitated. Alpha. Do it, Cody snapped. She wants him alive. Let him live to see what mercy looks like from my hand. They lowered James. He crumpled to the ground, still bound in chains. His breathing was shallow, but he was alive. Take him away, Cody ordered. Keep him caged. Then he turned to me, his tone softening to false courtesy. Come, healer, you'll walk beside me now. He reached out. I flinched but did not refuse. There was no power in refusal yet. We moved through the forest together, torches weaving ahead of us. Behind, I could hear the clank of James's chains fading into the dark. Cody's mansion rose from the woods like a scar left by wealth, smaller than James's fortress but newer, its stones pale and polished, windows bright with lamplight. Gold trim glimmered along the gates, the sign of a man who valued display above honor. You like it? Cody asked. It's different, I said. I like every enemy of James. He laughed softly. A woman of passion and spite. Good, spite makes useful allies. Give me a chance, I said, letting my voice tremble with cunning. A chance to take revenge on him for my father. Cody's smile widened. If you impress me, you'll have it. Inside, the air smelled of spice and new wood. Guards bowed as he passed. He led me down a long corridor lined with red banners, each stitched with the emblem of a crescent fang. At the far end waited a chamber, smaller than the one I'd had at James's estate but clean, with a bed, basin, and a single window overlooking the forest. This will be yours, Cody said. Rest, you'll need your strength. I inclined my head, keeping my tone even. Thank you. He stepped closer, too close. The lamplight touched his face, showing the smoothness of youth beneath the cruelty. I value obedience, he said, and loyalty. I have both, I lied. He nodded, eyes wandering where they should not. We'll see. Without warning, his hand brushed my waist. I stiffened. He smiled as if testing a boundary. I pushed his hand away. Don't. The sound of the slap was small but sharp. My head turned with it. Pain bloomed along my cheek. You are a worker, he said coldly. And I am Alpha. Don't mistake comfort for privilege. He caught me again, forcing a rough kiss that tasted of ash and command. Nothing tender, only power. When he released me, his voice was almost bored. Learn your place. He left the room. The door closed with a click that echoed like a lock. I stood still until his steps faded. My cheek burned. My hands shook. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the moon through the narrow window. The world outside was silver and still, the kind of stillness that follows storms and hides the next one coming. I will escape, I whispered. I will not be touched by monsters again. The forest answered with a single wind gust that bent the torches below. Somewhere, faint and far, a wolf howled, a sound half warning, half promise. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. Tomorrow would not find me in this room. The moon lingered high, a pale coin over Cody's lands, when I woke to the scrape of a bolt sliding back. Someone entered, soft-footed, carrying the scent of wet leather and metal. "Food," the guard muttered, setting a tray on the table. The bread was coarse, the broth thin, but hunger left me no choice. When he left, I counted his steps until silence returned. The bruise on my cheek had already faded to a faint warmth. Shifter blood healed fast, even half-human as I was. Yet inside, the wound deepened. I paced the room until dawn's first light spread across the floorboards. Outside, the manor was waking. Voices drifted, Cody's men boasting about victory, about how the Alpha Wolfstone had been dragged to the cages like a beaten hound. Every word pierced me. James was still alive, caged, again. I pressed my palms to the window pane. The forest beyond glittered with dew, deceptively peaceful. Somewhere out there, my past and future tangled together, one man who had killed my father, another who had tried to own me. When the guard returned mid-morning, I asked to see the wounded. "Alpha's orders," he said with a shrug. "If you can fix his men, he might feed you better." They took me through corridors lined with banners, each one newer, brighter, emptier than those in James's halls. Cody's power smelled of polish, not honor. In the lower chambers, injured soldiers lay on pallets. Most were young boys with cuts across their shoulders, feverish eyes. I knelt beside them one by one, letting the familiar hum of healing rise through me. Light glowed faintly under my fingertips. Flesh sealed, pain eased, breathing steadied. Their gratitude was wordless but real. One of them whispered, "Our Alpha said you were his prize." I kept my gaze on the wound. "Tell your Alpha I mend what I can, nothing more." By noon, my strength trembled. The guards led me back upstairs. Cody waited in the corridor, leaning against the wall, arms folded. His tunic was changed, his wound gone. "You keep your promises," he said. "I keep people alive." He smiled faintly. "That's what I meant." He walked beside me as if we were equals. "Do you know what makes a kingdom endure?" he asked. "Fear," I said. "Half right, fear and usefulness. Make yourself useful and no man wastes you." His tone was gentle, but every syllable carried a chain. When we reached my door, he brushed a strand of hair from my face. I didn't move. I only said, "Touch me again and you'll heal slower next time." He laughed, low and amused. "I like your fire, little healer, but be careful, too much fire burns its keeper." When he was gone, I sank to the floor. For the first time since my capture, I let myself cry. Not from pain, from the weight of being alive when everything good seemed turned to ash. Hours passed. I listened to the manor breathing, doors closing, men shouting orders, the wind hissing through banners. Somewhere below, the clang of chains echoed, a rhythm my heart already knew. James. I found the courage near midnight. I took the candle from the bedside table, hid it under my shawl, and slipped into the hall. The guards outside my door were asleep, wine-heavy. I moved like a shadow. Down 2 flights of stairs, through a corridor smelling of damp stone until the air grew colder. Then a faint groan. A cage. The same sound I had once made in his walls. "James," I whispered. He stirred. Moonlight from a barred window traced his profile. His hair was unbound, his hands still chained, but his eyes, those silver-blue eyes, opened at my voice. "Anna," it was barely breath. "I came to see if you're alive." He smiled faintly, alive enough to regret everything. "Good," I said. "Regret is a start." He studied me in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here, if Cody finds." "I don't care," I cut him off. "He wants to use me, not kill me, and you can't even stand." He managed a soft laugh. "You always find ways to insult me that sound like concern." "Maybe they are," I admitted. I knelt, touching the chain between his wrists. The iron burned cold even through my sleeve. "I could heal the wound on your shoulder," I said, "but not the one between us." He closed his eyes. "Anna, your father, I don't know if he was guilty. I only know mine is dead." The truth in his voice hurt more than denial. Then we're both bound by ghosts, I whispered. I reached through the bars, letting light bloom between my palms. His breathing steadied. Color returned to his face. The chain shimmered briefly, as if the metal itself remembered mercy. When I withdrew my hand, his gaze caught mine. Why help me? Because Cody thinks power makes him immortal, I said. But you and I know what loss does. It teaches. He nodded slowly, then let me learn. Footsteps echoed down the passage. I blew out the candle and pressed myself against the wall. Guards passed, laughing. When their voices faded, James whispered, "Go, before they see you." I hesitated. If I leave, it's not forever. Tomorrow night I'll come again. We'll find a way out. Honest. But I was already moving. The corridor wound upward, heart pounding in my ears. By the time I reached my chamber, dawn's first color brushed the horizon. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. Every muscle trembled, yet my mind was clear for the first time in days. Cody thought me broken. James thought me lost. Both were wrong. On the table lay the untouched bread from morning. I tore it in half and fed a small bird perched at the window. It fluttered once, then vanished into the light. "Fly far," I murmured. "Tomorrow I follow." I gathered my shawl, the candle stub, and a small knife I'd hidden beneath the bed. As the sun rose over the forest, its gold washed the room in fragile hope. I whispered to that light, the only witness I trusted. "By tomorrow night," I vowed, "neither Alpha will own me again." Dinner was quiet, almost delicate, as if silence itself feared Cody. Silver spoons clicked once or twice, then stilled. When the plates were cleared, I excused myself, bowing faintly, the way his servants did. He watched me go with a smile that meant I see everything. The corridors smelled of oil and ash. I wrapped my shawl tighter and followed the glow that led toward the main doors. For a heartbeat, I thought the night might take me. But as I turned the last corner, torchlight flared, and there they were. Lines of guards, armor glinting like fangs, spears crossed in an unspoken warning. I stopped. "What?" I asked lightly. "I'm not escaping, fools. I'm looking for your Alpha." Their laughter was uncertain. One man, braver or duller than the rest, gestured left. "That way." "Thank you," I said, walking as if my pulse were steady. The truth settled with every step. I was caged again. James's cage had been velvet and restraint. Cody was iron dressed in gold. Both kept the sky out. At the end of the corridor, I saw him. Cody walked among his soldiers, tall, assured, polished like the blade he carried. When his eyes found mine, they softened just enough to pass for charm. "Anna." "I was feeling alone," I said, lowering my gaze just enough. He dismissed his men with a nod. "I'm always here." "Then let me talk with you, in private." He tilted his head, curious, pleased. "Of course." We walked together through shadowed halls. The echo of boots on marble filled the silence between us. As we passed the side cells, I caught a glimpse of silver eyes in the dark James. My breath stilled. He was alive, chained near Cody's chamber. I forced my face calm and kept walking. Inside Cody's room, the air was scented with wine and smoke. Drapes of crimson silk framed the walls. A bear pelt lay at our feet. He closed the door, but I turned the key myself. He smiled. "What changed you so suddenly?" "My clever mind," I said, stepping closer. "And what does your clever mind say?" "That it's wiser to please an Alpha than to provoke him." He laughed, a sound meant to show power disguised as amusement. "I like it." I met his eyes. "Do you?" "Yes." I moved nearer, brushing his sleeve as if by accident. "How do I look?" "Beautiful," he said, "dangerously so." I smiled. Then perhaps danger likes company. A whisper of distance vanished. I rose on my toes and kissed his cheek, barely more than a breath. His surprise pleased me. His vanity drowned his suspicion. He lifted a hand, resting it lightly at my waist. My pulse hammered, but my face remained calm. His fingers traced the fabric as if testing ownership. I breathed slowly, keeping my voice soft. "Are you married, Cody?" "Yes." "I like married men," I said. He chuckled. Then you'll like me. He leaned in. The scent of smoke and leather crowded the air. I let him come close enough to think he'd won, then drew back a fraction, lips just touching his. For one heartbeat, everything stilled the masquerade held. Then a knock shattered it. We broke apart. I turned, smoothing my blouse. Cody straightened his coat. "Come in," he called. The door opened to a soldier in half armor, dust-covered. I blinked. The crest on his shoulder was Cody's, it was Wolfstone's. Cody didn't notice. He smiled. "Anna, even James's men are mine now." I returned the smile faintly. "Then I suppose I am yours too." The soldier's gaze darted between us, confused, almost horrified, but he swallowed it and said, "Alpha James has escaped." Cody's eyes flared crimson. "What?" He shoved past him and strode into the hall. I followed, feigning alarm. The manor erupted, torches flaring, shouts echoing, guards scattering. Amid the chaos, the same soldier caught my sleeve and pulled me into a narrow passage. "Anna, are you out of your mind?" he hissed. "What were you doing with him?" "Trying to live," I said. "It's what we do when we can't fight." He released me, studying my face. "I'm Tasso. I served James for 10 years. He's still my alpha." "Then why are you here?" "Because I had to be, until the right moment." "What moment?" "This one." He glanced toward the sound of distant yelling. "Iris betrayed everyone. It was Iris who killed James's father, not yours." My world tilted. "You're lying." "I'm not. Iris framed your father to drive James mad with revenge. He wanted both men dead, James and his sire, so he could claim the pack himself." I stepped back, heart pounding. "Then how did James live?" "The assassin meant for him died before reaching the manor. Fate chose who breathed longer." I swallowed hard. "And Iris, what does he plan now?" "To rule both packs. He's already in touch with Cody's enemies. When they've destroyed each other, he'll take the ruins." The truth came like ice water. Then James is not the monster I thought. Tasso nodded once. "He's many things, but not that. Even when he thought you betrayed him, he spared you." "Because I'm a healer." "He had a healer before he killed her when he learned she used him. If you were only useful, you'd already be dead." I met his eyes. "You think he cares?" Tasso shook his head. "He respects life. That's rarer than love." The hall outside thundered with Cody's orders, men running, doors slamming. We had minutes, maybe less. "I want a deal," I whispered. He leaned closer. "Speak." "If I free your alpha and heal him, I'm done. No more cages, no more wars. I live my own life." Tasso's voice softened. "You have my word." I glanced once toward the grand hall where Cody's rage echoed, then back at the loyal soldier. "Then let's move." We slipped through the servants' corridor, footsteps muffled on old rugs. Every torch felt like an accusation. The air smelled of storm and smoke. At the top of the stair, Tasso pointed toward my chamber. "They moved him near your room to keep him under your nose." The irony almost made me laugh. "Perfect," I whispered. Inside, the cage waited, veiled by drapes. James was slumped inside, barely conscious. His shirt was torn, his skin gleamed with sweat and blood. "James," I breathed, kneeling, "can you hear me?" He stirred. "Anna." "Don't speak, let me." I placed my palms on his chest. The familiar warmth surged through me, that golden hum of healing, softer than light, stronger than fire. His wounds closed one by one. The color returned to his face. His breath evened. Tasso's sword slid between the bars, snapping the lock with a single twist. The cage creaked open. "Can you walk?" I asked. He managed a faint nod. "For you, I'll try." We moved together toward the door. Hope bloomed and then froze. A slow, deliberate clap echoed behind us. "Well," said a voice I had learned to dread, "what a beautiful plan." Cody stood in the doorway, ringed by guards. Torches painted him in gold and shadow. His smile was a blade. Cody's hands came together once more, slow and mocking. "Well done, healer," he said. "You outwit wolves and kings alike." Torches flared behind him, the light gilding his soldiers' blades. The air smelled of sweat, iron, and betrayal. James drew a shallow breath beside me. "Anna." "Quiet," I whispered. "You've spent enough blood for both of us." Cody stepped forward. "You thought I wouldn't see this coming." His eyes shifted, a brief flash of feral yellow beneath the human calm. "You free my enemy in my own house." Tasso raised his sword, planting himself between us. "You've no house, Cody. You only have prisoners." For an instant, no one moved. Then the soldiers behind Cody hesitated. Their loyalty, forged in fear, flickered when Tasso spoke. Cody laughed softly. "Fools, you think loyalty changes with a whisper." But the whisper was already spreading. The men who had served Wolfstone before looked at one another, recognition dawning. Their blades tilted slightly, no longer toward James. Tasso shouted, "For the true Alpha." Everything exploded. The hallway became thunder. Torches crashed from sconces, smoke curled upward. Wolves half-shifted, claws gleaming, the floor slick with scattered wine. I dragged James toward the wall, pressing my back against stone as shadows clashed around us. I could feel the pulse of the fight, not violence, but rhythm. The growl, the impact, the breath. My hands glowed as I reached the wounded, patching skin, steadying hearts. Every healed soldier rose again, returning to the fray. Cody's men faltered. The balance turned. "Stay here," Tasso barked, darting into the smoke. James tried to follow, but his knees buckled. I caught him before he fell. "You're not healed yet," I said. His voice was low. "You keep forgetting I'm not yours to mend." "Then live to prove it," I said sharply. "Breathe, Alpha." He exhaled once, steadying, and then the world dimmed to a strange calm. Through the haze, Cody emerged again, stripped of command, his coat torn, his eyes burning with disbelief. "Traitors," he hissed, "all of you." His gaze found James. "You still crawling." James rose slowly. The air trembled. His bones cracked softly beneath the skin, not gruesome, only primal. His eyes shone with silver fire. "I don't crawl," he said. "Not anymore." The two alphas faced each other amid the fallen torches, their shadows merging on the wall. When they struck, the sound was like storm against mountain. Cody lunged first, faster than sight. James met him halfway, steel against claw. Sparks arced in the air. I pressed against the wall, barely breathing, every movement etched into my mind, Cody's precision, James's fury. Hearts of wolves beat like war drums around us. I saw James stumble once, blood darkening his sleeve. My hands rose instinctively, light flared. He caught it, a ripple of warmth across his back, and his stance straightened. The silver in his eyes deepened until it seemed the moon itself fought beside him. Cody realized too late. He struck again, James caught the blow, twisted, and threw him across the hall. The crash echoed through the manor. Dust fell from the beams. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Cody staggered to his knees. "Finish it," he growled. James's breathing slowed. "No." Cody blinked. "What?" "You're already finished," James said. "You just don't know it yet." He turned away. Cody lunged, desperate. I shouted, and before steel could meet flesh, James pivoted and slammed his arm aside, sending Cody crashing to the floor again. His blade clattered away. "Enough," I whispered. "He's beaten." James looked down at the fallen Alpha. "You would have used her," he said softly, "the same way others used power." Cody's voice was hoarse. "She offered herself." "No," James said. "She offered hope. You turned it to filth." The words landed harder than any strike. Cody lowered his eyes. The fight drained from him. The remaining guards stepped back, uncertain whom to serve. Tasso reappeared from the smoke, face streaked with ash. "It's done," he said. "The men have yielded." James nodded once. The weight of command settled over him like an old cloak reclaimed. I sank to my knees, exhaustion flooding through me. My palms still glowed faintly. I pressed them to the nearest wounded man until the light dimmed. Tasso approached, bowing to James. "Alpha." James clasped his shoulder. You saved us." "I only followed the healer," Tasso said. "She saw the truth first." James turned toward me. The expression on his face was unreadable, half gratitude, half something deeper, quiet and restrained. I rose slowly. "I had a deal with Tasso," I said. "I walk free." Tasso looked uneasy. It was the only way to win. James's gaze stayed on me. "Then I honor it." Relief and ache twined inside me. "Then I'll walk on my own," I said. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture more regal than any crown. "You always did." But as I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "There's one thing left." I faced him. "What now?" "Iris." The name fell like a blade between us. "He destroyed my father. I'll end it." "So you need me," I said quietly. "One last time." He nodded. "One last healing. After that, you're free." For a moment, the chaos around us faded. Only wind through broken windows, embers drifting like small stars. I looked at the ruin of the hall, the fallen torches, the bent iron, the tired but breathing men. Every story here was written in smoke and mercy. I stepped closer, brushing dust from his sleeve. "Then let's finish what we both began." He smiled, not the cold, guarded smirk of an alpha, but something human, weary, almost gentle. Together, I said. Outside, the first light of dawn bled over the horizon. It painted the walls gold, softening the scars of battle. The surviving wolves lifted their heads to the sky, not in triumph, but release. Tasso gave a low whistle. "The manor's yours again, Alpha." James glanced around, then shook his head. "Ours," he corrected quietly. He turned toward the doorway. "We leave within the hour. Wolfstone waits, and Iris will not." I followed him through the wreckage. My steps were slow, deliberate. For the first time, I wasn't being dragged or guarded. I walked beside him, equal distance, equal silence. When we reached the courtyard, the air tasted of morning. Smoke curled from spent torches, horses stamped restlessly. James paused beside the gates. "Are you afraid?" he asked. I thought for a moment. Of him, no. Of what happens after, yes. He smiled faintly. "That makes two of us." I met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between us. Not forgiveness yet, but the shape of it. We mounted separate horses, the wind rising around us. Behind, Tasso gathered the men. Ahead, the road wound through the dark forest toward Wolfstone and whatever truth waited there. I looked once more at the dawn, at the faint crimson line where night surrendered. For the first time in years, it looked like freedom. Dawn had not yet lifted the fog when Wolfstone's black gates groaned open. James rode first through the mist, his horse dark against the pale road, Tasso at his side. I followed close behind, the forest wind cool against my face, smelling of pine and ash and something older, the scent of a home once lost. The courtyard was empty. No guards, no torches, no trace of battle or life, only the flutter of torn banners above the stone arch. James dismounted first, his boots striking the flagstones with slow, deliberate weight. "Clever," he murmured. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hunting. "Coward," I answered, stepping beside him. Tasso scanned the shadows. "Or maybe he plans to return with more soldiers." James's jaw tightened. "Then we'll meet him halfway." The silence pressed around us, thick and heavy. It was stranger than noise, the kind of silence that knows it is being watched. We split a search. Inside the halls, I found traces of haste, half-burned candles, a plate overturned in the corridor, a wine glass broken on the stair. The air smelled faintly of iron. Every room echoed my footsteps as if the manor itself remembered me. Once, these walls had been my cage. Tonight they felt like the hollow ribs of something that had finally died. I opened every door, finding only dust and shadows. In the council chamber, papers lay scattered, maps, trade notes, and on one parchment, a single red ink mark, Iris's crest. When I returned to the grand stair, James was already there, Tasso beside him. "Nothing," I said. "Gone," he confirmed. The word lingered between us like a breath of frost. We rode again before the sun rose high. James's wolf sense had caught a trail, a faint scent of smoke and pine resin, too clean for coincidence. "He didn't go far," James said, eyes narrowing toward the eastern ridge. "He's arrogant," Tasso muttered. "Thinks he can regroup." "Then we won't wait for his invitation," James said. He dismounted, knelt in the dirt, and inhaled deeply. The shift came quietly, a ripple under his skin, his eyes flashing gold for an instant. He was still human in form, but the wolf in him woke like lightning underwater. I felt the change in the air, the pull of something ancient, the hum that blurred man and beast. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. Then he rose, voice low and certain. "This way." We followed him through the forest, the sound of hooves muffled in moss. The trees leaned close overhead, their leaves whispering secrets of those who had passed before. Somewhere far ahead, crows stirred. The wind carried the faintest smell of oil and blood. James moved like instinct, pausing only to touch bark to listen. Every motion was purpose. I wondered if I'd ever be that certain of anything. The trees opened suddenly, a clearing. Sunlight spilled through it like broken glass. Tasso raised his hand. "Wait." Too late. A hiss in the air, then chaos. Arrows dropped from the branches. The first struck the man beside me. He fell without sound. Another tore through the air near James, splintering a tree trunk. "Above," Tasso shouted. We scattered, diving for cover. The forest erupted with the noise of snapping boughs and breaking branches. I heard the dull thud of bodies hitting earth, 13 men down before I could breathe. I crawled to the nearest soldier. His eyes were open but unfocused, blood pooling beneath him. I pressed my hands to his chest, willing the warmth to rise. The light flickered, then vanished. Nothing. "Too late," I whispered. A roar answered, deep, feral, tearing the quiet apart. James leapt upward, impossibly fast. Through the blur of leaves, I saw him drag a figure from the canopy, black cloak, pale eyes. Iris. "Take him on the ground," I cried. James twisted, slammed the man from midair. They hit earth with a sound that shook the clearing. Dust and leaves spiraled around them. Iris rolled, drawing a blade. James caught his wrist, forced him back. Tasso rallied what men remained, driving off the rest of the ambushers. They fled like shadows breaking at dawn. Now there was only the two of them. I watched as they circled, predator and traitor. No words at first, only the rhythm of breath and the scrape of boots in soil. Then Iris sneered, voice dripping venom. "So the cub lived after all." James's reply was quiet. "You killed my father." "I freed him," Iris said. "From weakness, you never understood what power costs." James moved. The fight that followed was not savage but inevitable, a reckoning written in every motion. Iris struck with precision, James countered with instinct. The forest caught their struggle in flashes of movement, the glint of steel, the echo of impact. I held my breath as Iris feinted left, slashing across James's arm. The cut was shallow, but blood darkened his sleeve. I raised my hands to heal, but he shook his head, a silent command. Not yet. He wanted to finish this himself. He drove forward, pinning Iris against a fallen trunk. Their faces were inches apart. "You made me destroy the innocent," James said. "You turned a pack into a grave." Iris spat blood. "And still you follow the same rules. You'll never be more than an obedient beast." James's hand closed around the traitor's wrist. "Then die a beast." One motion, clean, merciful. Iris fell. His blade slid from his grasp and struck the ground with a muted chime. For a long moment, no one spoke. Wind rustled through the trees. The fight was over. Tasso stepped forward, breath ragged. "It's done." James looked down at Iris's still form, then at the men who remained. "No," he said quietly. "Now it begins." He turned to me. The light through the leaves caught his face, not fierce now, but tired. Human again. "Come, enough blood for one day." We rode back to Wolfstone in silence. The manor stood waiting, wounded but proud. By dusk, torches were lit once more. Servants and soldiers filled the halls like the return of breath to a body. James gathered them in the grand chamber. "Tonight," he said, voice carrying through the room, "we celebrate life because two hearts refuse to let it end." He looked to Tasso, my brother in battle, then to me, and my healer. Applause rose, uneven but warm. He turned toward me again. "Stay tonight, Anna, no cages, no orders, only peace." "Is this a trap?" I asked softly. He met my eyes. I gave my word. The hall glowed with firelight, faces weary but smiling. For the first time, there was laughter in these walls, real laughter, not the hollow kind that hides fear. I hesitated, then nodded. "Then I'll stay." James inclined his head. "Good, Wolfstone should remember joy." And as the musicians tuned their strings and servants carried wine through the hall, I realized how strange the world could be, to find peace in the place where I once begged for freedom. Evening deepened, wrapping Wolfstone in velvet light. The air buzzed with renewal, cooks in the kitchens shouting orders, soldiers hauling barrels of wine, laughter rising like music through the corridors. For once, no one feared the night. James had promised peace, and peace was being built with candles and sound. I stood at the edge of the grand hall, watching men hang crimson banners over the pillars. The smell of roasted bread and pine oil filled the air. I had never seen this place alive before, only as a shadow of what it was. James found me there, sleeves rolled, the faintest smile softening his usual command. In his hands, a wooden box bound with black ribbon. "May I?" he asked. I nodded. He set the box on the table and opened it. Inside lay folds of silk and lace, gowns of deep jewel colors. "I thought," he said carefully, "if you're staying, you should wear something worthy of tonight." I almost laughed. "You choose dresses now." "Only for women who saved my life twice," he said simply. I touched the fabric, crimson-edged with black, soft as breath. "This one." He bowed his head slightly. "A good choice." When he left, I carried the gown to the room I once hated. The walls remembered me, but they no longer felt cruel. I lit a single candle. The mirror in the corner caught my reflection, tired eyes, dust on my skin, but alive. I slipped into the gown. It hugged me like water and light. The lace along my arms shimmered faintly. The neckline was lower than I was used to, dipping like a secret. I tried to adjust it, then gave up with a half smile. "Beautiful lady," I whispered to my reflection, the words trembling with disbelief. I healed a faint bruise on my shoulder, smoothing the skin until it glowed. My hair, long and unruly, I braided halfway, letting the rest fall free. The candle flickered, painting warmth across my face. When I stepped into the corridor, the air caught whispers, a pause, heads turning. For a moment, I didn't know where to look. Then James appeared at the foot of the stairs. He wore no crown, only the simple dark coat of his lineage, yet the weight of an alpha clung to him effortlessly. He looked up and froze, not like a man seeing beauty, but like someone recognizing something long lost. He climbed the stairs halfway to meet me. "Beautiful lady," he said softly. "You not for tonight," I replied, echoing his old teasing tone. He smiled. "Then for tomorrow." We entered the hall together. Music began, low strings, soft drums, a rhythm older than war. He extended his hand. "Dance with me." I hesitated only a moment before placing my palm in his. His fingers were warm, steady. The crowd drew back. The melody wrapped around us like mist. We moved slowly at first, the kind of dance where breath becomes conversation. His hand rested at the small of my back, respectful, certain. When our eyes met, the noise around us dimmed. For the first time, I saw him without armor, the man beneath the alpha, the grief, the oath. The song changed, laughter rippled. A soldier approached, bowing clumsily. "May I?" James looked at me. I smiled faintly. "Of course." The soldier took my hand, leading me into the swirl of dancers. His steps were light, but his eyes weren't. They flickered down once, twice, not at my face. My skin prickled. I kept dancing, forcing a polite smile. Across the hall, James stood among his men, watching, expression unreadable. His gaze met mine, steady, questioning. The soldier leaned close. "You're quiet," he said. "I dance better that way." He laughed, gaze dropping again. I stopped moving. "You're looking at the wrong thing," I said quietly. He blinked, half drunk. "I'm looking at what you wanted to be seen." The music blurred. I stepped back. "Go away." He reached for my wrist. Before I could react, a voice cut through the music. "Let her go." James stood behind him. The hall stilled. The soldier dropped his hand instantly and stepped back. "I meant no." "Leave," James said. No anger, just command. When the man was gone, I exhaled. "He was strange," I said quickly, not wanting to admit the humiliation. James's eyes narrowed slightly. What was he trying to do? "Just talk," I lied. "I need a drink." He nodded once. "All is yours." I walked to the bar, long oak, gleaming under lanterns. I poured wine into a crystal cup. It tasted dull, flat. I took another sip, waiting for its warmth, but none came. When I turned, laughter echoed. A woman in silver spun too close to James and stumbled. She fell against him, her lips brushing his. Gasps fluttered through the room. Before I knew what I was doing, I was already walking toward them. "Hey," I said sharply, "what's your problem?" The woman flushed. "I slipped, there's no problem." I tipped my glass, the red wine spilled down her dress. "Now there is, you should change." Her eyes flashed. She lifted her hand to strike me. James caught her wrist midair. "Enough." She froze, startled, then turned and fled into the crowd. I looked at him. "You're enjoying too many women tonight." "What?" His brow furrowed. "I was just dancing." "All alphas are the same." "Not me." "You're not different." His voice cooled. "Excuse me." He turned away, crossing to the bar. The music resumed, trying to hide the fracture that had opened in the night. I stood alone, heart pounding, eyes on the reflection of candlelight in spilled wine. For a moment, I almost called after him. Then I didn't. Because part of me already knew, this peace, this warmth, could never last. The hall had quieted to a low hum, laughter soft as candle smoke, music fading to the corner where only shadows still danced. Wine glowed ruby in tall glasses, catching the trembling light of chandeliers that swayed gently in the night air. I stood near the bar again. The crowd had thinned, the torches guttering low. Outside, the forest slept under pale moonlight, but inside Wolfstone, time felt dreamlike, as if the world had chosen to rest, except for the two of us. James poured himself another glass, his sleeves rolled, throat marked faintly from some forgotten fight. His movements were unhurried, yet the air between us carried the same weight it always had, the silence before something inevitable. I reached for another drink, my fifth, maybe sixth. I had stopped counting. "Why didn't you destroy me?" I asked suddenly, "when you thought I was betraying you?" He looked over the rim of his glass, eyes steady in the dim. "Because I never truly believed you did." "Then why cage me?" "I needed time," he said, voice quiet, "to discover the whole truth, to understand if I'd lost my judgment or my heart." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it hurt. "And what did you find?" "That both were already gone." I took another drink, slower this time, the warmth burning down to the ache beneath my ribs. "Tomorrow," I said, "I'll be free, the greatest queen alive with no crown, no pack, and no man." His brow lifted. "How so?" "I'll walk out before dawn," I said. "I don't need mansions or guards or anyone's chains to keep me safe." He smiled faintly. "You're trying to make me feel guilty." "No," I said. "I'm trying to make you understand." He turned toward me fully, one elbow on the bar. "Then explain it." "You all," I said softly, "are tied to one another with invisible chains. You call it loyalty. I call it fear." He tilted his head, watching me like I was a storm forming. "That's not fear, Anna. That's protection." I swirled the wine in my glass, watching its red ripple like blood under glass. "No, that's an invisible cage." He took his drink in silence, then said, "You hate me, don't you?" "Yes," I whispered. "Of course I do." Because you're an alpha. And if I were? I blinked, my head light from the wine. Then maybe I'd have stayed, maybe I'd have liked you, maybe I'd have come closer. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, then quiet hunger. He glanced around, the hall had nearly emptied. The few left were too busy with laughter to notice us. He set his glass down carefully. "Then assume I'm not an alpha, just a man." I raised my glass again, the world swaying a little. "Then what?" "Let's talk like strangers," he said. "Like we never met before, like this is the first time you've walked into my life." I smiled, amused and dizzy. "All right, stranger." He straightened his coat. "Miss, may I offer you a drink?" "Ah," I said, pretending to think. "You sound like a waiter." "I take my job seriously." I leaned on the counter, chin on my hand. "Then, what does the best waiter in Wolfstone recommend?" He poured for me, careful, exact. "Something that tells the truth slowly." I laughed again. "You're good at this." He looked up, and his eyes caught mine. Not the gaze of an alpha now, but of a man quietly unraveling. We kept talking nonsense, fragments of imagined lives. He said he was a traveler from the north. I said I was a runaway healer who made herbs in moonlight. Every word blurred into warmth. Every laugh drew us closer. My seventh glass spilled over a little, dripping down my wrist. I licked it away, laughing at nothing. He watched me with that same strange softness. "Another?" he asked. "One more," I said, "for the road I'll never take." He poured, and we clinked glasses. By the time I reached my 10th, half the wine missed my mouth, falling across my gown in dark stains. I looked down, startled, then started laughing. "Now look what you've done," I said, turning toward him. "You should take responsibility, waiter." His lips twitched. "I suppose I should. Come, miss, I'll find you a dress." I wobbled as I stood. "You're sweet for a servant." "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, half bowing, half laughing, "but you'll have to guide me. I can't trust my legs right now." "Perfect," I said, and reached for his hand. Our fingers met, unsteady, warm. We started walking down the hall. Or stumbling. Or something between both. We leaned into each other for balance, laughter echoing softly down the corridor. Once, we bumped into the wall and both laughed harder. His shoulder brushed my cheek. The touch lingered too long, neither of us daring to pull away. When we finally reached my door, I was breathless from laughter, my hair half undone. He opened it and froze. A couple, tangled and startled, turned to us from the bed. "What?" I blinked, sober for a second. "What are you doing here?" The soldier jumped up, adjusting his belt. "Apologies, my lady." They fled, half-dressed, tripping over each other. I burst into soft laughter again. "My room is famous tonight." James shook his head, rubbing a hand over his face. "You need to change." "Then help me." "I'm not supposed to." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Do it." He hesitated. "Anna." "Come on, waiter," I teased, eyes glimmering. "You offered to help." The room was quiet again. Only the echo of our laughter lingered, caught somewhere between the walls and the flicker of the candle near the window. James still stood by the door, the hem of his coat uneven from our stumble down the corridor. His hair had come loose from the careful tie he always wore. One dark strand fell across his forehead. He looked less like an alpha and more like a man who had misplaced every piece of his restraint. "Anna," he said softly, "you should rest." I reached for the ribbon of my gown. "Then help me." He froze, breath unsteady. "You're asking too much of me." "Am I?" The ribbon slipped from my fingers, the silk loosened at my shoulder. Candlelight spilled across my skin, warm as sunlight through wine. He turned his gaze aside, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. I stepped closer. The scent of his cologne, cedar, smoke, and rain filled the small distance between us. "Why do you look away?" I whispered. "Because I'm trying to be a good man." "And I said, am trying not to feel alone." The words hung there, heavy and simple. He looked at me then, really looked, and something broke quietly between us. The kind of silence that has no cure but touch. He reached for the cloak that hung nearby and placed it around my shoulders, though the gesture only drew us closer. My fingers brushed his wrist by accident. His pulse jumped beneath my skin. I should have stepped back. Instead, I rested my forehead against his chest. He exhaled as if the world had been waiting for that one breath. "Anna." "Don't speak," I murmured. He didn't. His hands found the edges of the cloak and drew it tighter around me. My heart beat against his breath warmed the side of my face. The candle wavered as though even the flame had begun to blush. Our laughter from moments ago had turned to stillness. My name left his lips again, slower this time, like a prayer he had no right to say. When I lifted my face, his eyes met mine, gold-rimmed with ache. I rose on my toes, and our lips touched, not with hunger, but with the ache of two souls too long kept apart. It was a gentle, uncertain kiss, the kind that begins in apology and ends in something far deeper. His hands hesitated before finding the small of my back. My fingers tangled in his hair, the same hair I had once sworn to despise. The night pressed closer, thick with warmth and rain scent. My skin remembered every tremor of his breath, every pause where he waited for me to turn away. I never did. We moved as if led by music only we could hear. His voice caught when I whispered his name. Mine trembled when he whispered mine. Each heartbeat found the other, and time folded in on itself until there was only this. Two people who had spent too long fighting the wrong battles. He lifted me, barely, only enough that I felt the air between us vanish. I could feel his heartbeat through every layer of fabric, steady and fierce, like a promise. His touch never strayed. It lingered on safe places, my shoulders, my hands, the side of my neck, yet it burned through me all the same. We kissed again, slower. The world dimmed to candlelight and the sound of rain. The room smelled of wine and warmth, of surrender without words. When he finally whispered, "Tell me to stop," I shook my head and said, "Don't." The night blurred. I remember the sound of my heartbeat, the brush of his breath near my ear, the soft press of his palm against the place where my heart lived. He whispered something, I never caught it, and the rest was silence, the kind that means safety. The flame of the candle leaned sideways and went out. Morning. Light woke me before sound did, thin and silver, sliding through the curtain. My head felt heavy, my heart stranger still. The scent of rain lingered, mixed with faint traces of wine and warmth. James was beside me, asleep. His hand rested near my heart, not possessive, only still. The sheet covered us both, tangled as though the night had tried to keep us together. For a long moment I just watched him, the Alpha who had been my enemy, my captor, and now something I could not yet name. When I finally slipped out of bed, I found my dress folded neatly on the chair. His care in that small act undid me more than any touch had. I dressed slowly, quietly. My body still carried echoes of his warmth, not shame, not pride, just the memory of something human. He stirred. "Anna." I turned, halfway to the door. "Go back to sleep, Alpha." He sat up, eyes clouded. "Did I?" "No," I said softly. "We both did." He bowed his head. "If I've hurt you." "You didn't," I cut in. "But the world will say you did, and I'll let them, because that is the only way I get to walk free." He nodded once, like a man signing a quiet vow. "Then I'll make it right," he said. "You'll have my name." I smiled faintly. "That's not what I wanted." "I know," he said. "It's what I owe." Outside, the bells of Wolfstone tolled for morning. The storm had passed. Inside, the world had changed, not in thunder, but in the smallest of silences. And though I told him I would never love an Alpha, my heart had already betrayed me. The morning felt unreal. Sunlight poured through the high windows of Wolfstone Manor, gilding the marble floors in pale gold. The banners of the pack hung still. The torches had burned low, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Servants moved quickly, arranging flowers, lighting candles, dressing the hall. None of this had been planned. Yet somehow James had commanded an entire wedding to rise from the ashes of the night. And I, the unwilling bride, stood before the mirror in silence. My hair was brushed loose, falling like dark silk over the gown of ivory and lace they had brought. I traced the edge of the neckline, remembering the candlelight from last night, the heat, the way his breath had felt against my skin. My chest still carried the ghost of that warmth, not shame, not quite pride, but something in between. They said he had not slept, that he spent the whole dawn packing the corridors, arranging every detail. I wondered if he was trying to earn forgiveness or simply forget. Either way, he would fail. The door creaked open. James stood there, the alpha, the man, the one who had once been my enemy and now was bound to me by both mistake and mercy. He looked tired, yet when he saw me, his shoulders eased. "You look," he began, then stopped himself. "You look like peace." "Peace?" I asked, smiling faintly. "I doubt you know what that looks like." He smiled too, a weary one. "Then maybe you'll teach me." The ceremony was brief. The hall smelled of pine and rain. Candles shone like tiny moons along the walls. The priest's words blurred, but I caught the important ones: Alpha, Luna, vow, bond. When James placed the ring on my hand, his touch lingered. "You don't have to say yes," he whispered. "I already did," I replied softly. "That's why it hurts less." We sealed it with silence instead of a kiss. The crowd cheered, and yet I felt as if we had just buried something sacred beneath the sound. For my father, for myself, for the girl who once fetched water from a well, I stood taller. The feast followed, loud and bright. The long tables overflowed with fruit and bread, laughter bouncing against the stone. James sat beside me, quiet amid the noise, answering my every small request with a nod. When I asked that the servants eat first, he agreed. When I asked that a rude soldier leave the hall, he obeyed. When I asked for silence for the fallen, he stood. The pack saw it, the alpha who once commanded, now listening to his Luna. Power, I learned, does not roar. It whispers, and men obey. James lifted his cup once and said to the crowd, "To the woman who made a wolf remember he was once a man." Applause followed. I smiled, but my heart felt heavy. His remorse was my crown, and I wore it well. Later, when the music faded and the guests withdrew, James walked me back to my chamber. The corridor glowed with golden light. He stopped at the door. "Anna," he said quietly, "about that night if I could take it back." "You can't," I said, "and I don't want you to." He looked startled. "You do." "No, because then you wouldn't carry the guilt that keeps you kind." His jaw tightened, then softened. "You really believe this is punishment?" "I believe," I whispered, "that guilt is the only thing that can teach a man like you to love gently." He said nothing. His hand brushed my cheek before he turned and walked away. I lay on the bed later, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight stretched across the floor, soft and silver, touching the corner of the mirror where my reflection stared back at me. My heart beat quietly, steady, almost calm. "Now," I murmured, "James will always feel guilt for a lifetime, and I will take advantage of it. Maybe this is a small revenge for my father." I closed my eyes, letting the thought linger, but another followed, gentler and truer. Or maybe this is how the world balances itself, not through vengeance, but through understanding. I remembered his trembling hands at the altar, the way he had looked at me without possession, only sorrow. And I knew that somewhere in all this chaos, love had found a strange way to exist, not pure, not innocent, but real. When I woke the next morning, James was sitting near the window. The light framed him in gold. He looked up from the papers in his hands and smiled faintly. "Good morning, Luna." The word didn't sound like a title anymore. It sounded like a name he had always meant to say. I walked to him, stood by the light, and for the first time, I reached for his hand not as a weapon but as a choice. "Good morning, Alpha," I said softly. Outside, the forest breathed. The birds stirred in the high pines. The world, broken and mended, began again. And in that quiet morning, not in victory, not in defeat, but in forgiveness, Our story finally found its peace.